virtually via Zoom and in person to convene SEAL's budget oversight hearing with the several agencies. We will be streaming and recording on committee's YouTube channel named EAL Committee. Purpose of today's budget oversight hearing is to glean more information about agency spending and any budgetary concerns. Additionally, we will speak with our agencies to identify their spending pressures and proactively inquire about any programmatic gaps or issues that may be costing the district. I look forward to these discussions today. And while we also focus on prioritizing district residents and their ability to access workforce opportunities and services that make our community stronger, which is one of the foremost concerns for this committee. Today, we will hear from our government witnesses from Destination DC, the Office of Campaign Finance, and the Board of Elections. And so we'll recognize any of my colleagues who have joined me. Okay, we're soloing again today. And we are ready to begin. But first, let me remind the public about the significance of the Destination DC program. It serves as the lead organization to manage and market Washington, D.C. as a premier global convention, tourism, and special events destination. Destination DC is a private nonprofit entity with a membership of more than 1,000 businesses and organizations that support the district travel and tourism sector. Formerly known as Washington, D.C. Convention and Tourism Corporation, WCTC, the organization was renamed in 2008 to reflect the organization's increased emphasis on the city's unique aspects. For the third year in a row, Washington, D.C.'s tourism industry has set a record for visitations and economic impact. More than 27 million people visited the nation's capital in 2025, modestly surpassing the previous year record of 20 million visitors. Now, I can attest that 2026 will be even larger, being that I look out my office window from time to time, and even at 8 a.m., the buses have arrived. And I see the red, sometimes the green, sometimes the yellow, sometimes purple, all color shirts as they're trying to keep up with each other. Most importantly, I've been proud to watch them in the middle of the day actually try to get access to some of our restaurants. And I think with horror, how do 50 or 60 young people get in these restaurants? But that's for the Restaurant Association to figure out. I'm just so proud that we are still one of the main destinations in the United States for visiting. And so I look forward to hearing from Destination DC because they play an integral role in facilitating major events within the district, as well as just really a welcoming arm of our government, our community, to make sure that individuals enjoy visiting. So with that, we're now going to hear from our government witnesses, including President Elliott Ferguson. But first, I better swear he and his team in. So if you raise your right hand, do you swear and affirm that your testimony and any statements that you make before us today to be truthful and complete?
We do.
I do.
Thank you. And as you take to the mic, please give us your name and your position. Okay, we can begin when you're ready.
All right. Good morning. And thank you, Councilmember Bonds, for that good segue into our presentation today on the efficacy of Destination DC. As was referenced, my name is Elliott Ferguson. I have the pleasure of being the president and CEO of Destination DC, of course, the economic development organization that focuses on tourism and hospitality in tandem with other organizations such as Events DC, the Hotel Association, and the Restaurant Association. As you referenced, we're not a part of DC government, but clearly we work closely with DC government, several stakeholders, including our board of directors. I'm joined this morning by our board chair, Mead Atkinson, to my right, your left, our chief marketing officer, Robin McLean, and our chief financial officer, John Kim, as well as other members of the Destination DC team that are behind me that really represent the heart and soul of our organization. We're happy to testify this morning in terms of the performance of Destination DC, the efficacy of our event, of our activity in terms of bringing individuals to the city. I'm happy that you referenced buses coming into the city because that plays a huge role in what we do in terms of buses, folks coming in on buses, international visitors, conventioneers, and the likes. Our budget for fiscal year 2026 is $36.87 million, which is down 32% from fiscal year 2025 and 37% from 2024. As a note of reference, 70% of our budget comes from hotel taxes paid by visitors when they physically come to Washington and stay in a hotel. The rest comes from, as you referenced, we're a membership-based organization and other references and other activities that we do to bring in additional dollars. As we all know, the hotel tax is 15.95%, and Destination DC receives less than 1%, 0.097% of that tax. We use those dollars to really focus on promoting DC as a destination. Until October 2025, we received additional budget support through the Tourism Recovery District Act, which was put in place to help us focus on rebounding after COVID. Thanks to the Hotel Association in 2023, they supported a 1% increase in the hotel tax, which increased our budget to $25 million, and really changed the way in which we were able to promote DC as a destination. We did more large-scale advertising and used our 7 international offices to promote DC around the world. And DC became more competitive as we helped deliver a record economic impact for the city. And one thing you just referenced in terms of visitation, we remain one of the top destinations in the US in terms of international visitation, but we're between number 7 and 8. Normally when I make that reference, the immediate question is, well, who's number 1 through 7? That's normally Orlando, Miami, New York, Vegas, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Honolulu, and then Washington, DC. But when you think about that, there are other amazing cities like Chicago, Philadelphia, New Orleans, and the list goes on and on that we compete against to bring visitors to our cities against theirs. The reality is when you spend more in promoting a destination, there are positive results. And there's a return on investment study done by the CFO's office of DC. We started that a decade ago that really focuses on the efficacy of our efforts. The biggest investment that we've made is in domestic marketing in 2024, which led to visitor spending of over $555 million, a record, might I add, and record tax revenue of $47 million. The study shows that there's a 2-to-1 investment for every dollar that we spend on promoting Washington coming back to the city. Just recently on Wednesday at the Lincoln Theater and Ben's Chili Bowl, we announced record visitation in Washington, D.C. with over 27.2 million visitors, which is an increase of 20,000 from the year before. Now, to put that in perspective, when we did the same event the year before, we had over 1 million additional visitors, which is really tied to the additional dollars that we received to promote our destination and therefore more visitation. Despite international visitation being down 4% in 2025, we saw slight growth in domestic visitation. And of course, this all remains important to our economy as we look at a record number of jobs of 114,000, up 2%, $11.9 billion in visitor spending, up 4%, and $2.4 billion in taxes generated, up 4%. And these gains are clearly a big deal for the city. And this year, as we are focusing on Washington, we're doing our marketing without the TRD dollars, as you all know, and we have not been as positioned to be as aggressive without those additional dollars. Now, some people might ask, why do you have to invest in international marketing? And the reality is when sales are down, you need to be more aggressive as other countries and other cities are. And the answer is we must capture the market share of those who still travel, because international travel still remains important economically because they remain 4 times the spend of the domestic market. So as much as we love those buses and the 8th graders and all of those that are coming domestically, the reality is the international market has a larger international economic footprint. We lost the ability to compete effectively because we don't have those additional tourism recovery district dollars. But thanks to you, Councilmember Bonds, Chairman Mendelson, and other members of the council, we did get a $6 million supplement to our budget in 2026, which has been helpful. We've been operating in a weaker position fiscally, and those additional dollars were allocated, and we recognize, as the mayor's budget references, 2027 and 2028, that there's an opportunity for us to see additional dollars in fiscal year 2028, which will go a long way in terms of promoting Washington. But clearly, we're still focusing on 2026 and 2027. These are times where we should be spending more, especially with the negative rhetoric about Washington from a federal level. International travel is more difficult, and the list goes on, as we see in the news all the time. Adequate funding helps us to compete with other destinations, but also become resilient against other variables we can't control. There's a lot that we simply can no longer afford to do with these additional dollars. For example, with the TRD, our domestic advertising was about $23 million. So it dropped 2/3 to $7 million in fiscal year 2026. And as we look at the international market, it dropped from $4 million to $500,000 for 7 offices, which basically means it's non-existent. We've reduced our sales and marketing activities because of the fewer dollars that we have, especially internationally, as it led to fewer room nights. And we're doing more direct client-facing activities and we're doing fewer direct client activities and reduced the size and scale of our presence at important industry events. Unfortunately, competitors are outspending us, and they have a larger footprint in areas that we should be equally as competitive. Our funding levels now place us below most of our peers being other major cities. Top competing destination marketing organizations, as we're called, have an advantage because their funding is stable and layered. They often benefit from additional assessments like a TRD, but in this case called Tourism Improvement District dollars, as well as state dollars that are in place to promote their destinations. A good example, as I take a deep breath, is what happened recently with Choose Chicago. They recently increased their budget for Choose Chicago, which is the competitor of Destination DC, to $90 million to promote Chicago to the global and domestic community. Compare that to our spend of less than around $30 million, you can understand that Chicago will have a larger footprint with more advertising internationally and domestically, and it puts us at a deficit. Our work directly impacts DC's neighborhoods, businesses, and others that are reliant on a stronger visitor economy all year long. And positioning DC as an incredible place. Our job is to position DC as an incredible place to work and visit, which is extremely important. And our Only One DC campaign was developed with these variables and audiences in mind. It's also what sets Washington apart from our residents. It's also what sets Washington apart, which includes our residents. It's all about humanizing Washington and the 700,000 individuals that live in our city. And our videos showcase the attitude and personality of those that are native Washingtonians and those that have decided to relocate here and stay here after their post, perhaps in an embassy or somewhere else. And they help tell the story to the global community about how Washington is an amazing place to live, to work, to visit, and to stay. Before I close, I want to also mention Next DC, which was formerly known as the American Experience Foundation, and it stands for Network, Educate, Experience, and Travel. The organization introduces students to careers that they can have in tourism and hospitality through the city's summer internship program and DC high school hospitality programs. Since 2015, Next DC has awarded over $250,000 in scholarships to students. And this year alone, 21 DC high school students will receive scholarships to continue their education. These winners will be recognized later this month in a ceremony. These Next DC scholarships make a real difference in their future and gives those from disadvantaged neighborhoods, especially Black and Brown students, a chance to understand the dynamics of our industry and including the various jobs that are available. Councilmember Bonds, we appreciate you so much for all that you do for our industry as a whole, for Destination DC, and of course, the 14 years that you've committed in service to the great city of Washington. We, of course, appreciate Chairman Mendelson, DC Council, and of course, the mayor and her office for the support of our industry. We thank you for your consideration of Destination DC, especially as we look at our fiscal year 2027 budget. Additional funding proposed by the mayor's budget starting in 2028, again, is helpful and will remain a permanent source of revenue long-term, but we still remain concerned, as do our stakeholders in the industry, about 2026 and 2027 because we're not able to do the same level of sales and marketing as we were with the TRD. We need stable, reliable sources of funding in place so that we can maximize our efforts. Investing in our industry, which has proven to be an immediate return on investment, makes sense, and we certainly rely and hope to rely on the City Council and staff and our mayor to continue to grow our economy and the benefits of all sectors. I feel like I went out of order because I think the chairman of our board was supposed to testify before I was. So before I answer any questions, I'm going to turn this over to our board chair, Meade Atkinson, for additional comments.
Oops.
Okay, well, thank you. We're anxious to get your testimony as well, sir.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, Councilmember Bonds and any committee members that may be joining us virtually. My name is Meade Atkinson. I am the general manager for the Sonesta Hotels in Washington, D.C., and oversee both Capitol Hill and DuPont Circle. And I was born at Columbia Hospital for Women. So I've been around for many years. My connection today is as board chair of Destination DC, a role I've had for the last 2 years and been a part of the board for the last 10. And in the 2 years, it's really given me a great opportunity to kind of look under the hood and get to know this team behind me, and Elliot and his executive committee so well. And I certainly have also met other DMOs from other cities, and these guys are the gold standard. They really are as professional and as committed as it gets. In terms of TRD importance, the reason the Hotel Association wanted to go in this direction was basically as a result of the COVID hangover. People working from home, people deciding to have meetings virtually was making it a very slow recovery for the hotel, restaurant, and event industry here in Washington, D.C. D.C. is a remarkable city with so much to offer tourists and conventions alike, but contrary to public opinion, it doesn't sell itself. D.C. is expensive. The convention center is relatively small. Many other places like New York, Orlando, and Las Vegas are compelling, and as Elliot said, kind of sexier sometimes than what we see here in Washington, D.C. So one of the inherent challenges for us has always been funding relative to comparable destinations. I was proud to play a role in the solution to secure more stable funding for Destination DC while I was serving as board chair for the Hotel Association. During that time, DC's hotel industry rallied around a larger self-tax with the understanding that the additional revenue would go to Destination DC to market and sell our city. Increasing the hotel tax by 1% in 2023 to benefit Destination DC was a win-win for DC's economy. The additional revenue generated supported the hotel industry, and it was reinvested in the city through visitors, spending, and local jobs. And that's really important because the majority of that comes from outside people coming from the outside spending here, and so it's taxes from tourists coming from outside of the area. Now, without stable long-term funding, Destination DC's ability to market and sell the city is compromised. We have issues impacting our industry. We're very grateful for the mayor and council's consideration of our industry. Effective organizations have a long-term plan that leverage their budgets strategically. That's why DDC needs a steady and stable source of funding, so they're not wondering during every budget season if they'll have enough funding to position this incredible city in the way that we need to. Years ago, I was in Baltimore in a meeting with Mayor O'Malley, and I was stung by a comment that he made that hotel managers were transient and not tied and committed to the city. And sometimes that can be true, but what I want to tell you is that DDC is at the other end of the spectrum. Elliot and his team have spent literally decades together marketing this city. And it's not because they couldn't get another job. It's because they like what they do, they're committed, they see the effect that they have on hospitality in the city, businesses, and its people. They've proven that TRD dollars have been well spent with immediate ROI for Washington, D.C. The past 12 months have been volatile for our industry. And while 26 is looking stronger than 25 for hotels, there's still a lot of uncertainty tied to international visitation, which is down for both D.C. and the U.S., as well as a perception of our destination and rising costs. The hotel community continues to rely on this organization to counter negative narratives and position us for visitation. They need adequate funding from a permanent source. I can't imagine how difficult it would be to be in your shoes with not enough to go around for all the organizations that need funding. What I want to say is that Destination DC not only has an effect on hotels, restaurants, and attractions, but it, in often cases, brings people to the city who realize they want to live here, who realize that they want to start a business here, who realize that they want to come to school and go to one of the colleges here. Thank you, Councilmember Bombs, for your time today. We appreciate you and the entire council's work and support, and I'm also happy to take any questions.
Thank you both very much for your testimony. And you speak of subject matter that we in the district see every day. And it's good. I guess I need to zero in to the meat of what you have presented. And that is that the hotel tax was basically increased a few years ago. So with the thinking that Destination DC would, benefit from it. And then maybe a year or so ago, we kind of pulled the rug from under Destination DC and reduced that remittance and reduced it so that it's not even 1%. I'm not trying to start a revolt by the hotel industry where, you march down Pennsylvania Avenue to the Wilson Building with pitchforks or anything like that. But I am trying to understand, let's talk on the positive side. We know what we've done. And I'm sure that the belief at the time that we took that action was solvent. We were trying to make sure that we filled some gaps in those years. And at the same time, we saw your industry growing by leaps and bounds. Well, this is a new day now, is what you're saying. And you're saying that loss is showing up in where? Where is the loss showing up? That's what I'm trying to understand. because you shared that international travel is down, not just here, but throughout the US. So, yet we have maintained our stations in countries outside of the US, but we're not really getting the resource that we need, which is the tourist industry following. So, what do you propose that we do?
Be happy to start and allow or ask my board chair to also add additional comment. One of the things that is extremely important to our industry is the fact that when we receive additional dollars, it's not always recognized that the city of Washington, the residents of Washington really benefit. When we talk, if we spend $10 on promoting our city, there's a $20 return on investment. So therefore, additional taxes are generated, individuals in the industry are working, and the list goes on in terms of the revenue generated. But on the back end of that, what happens that is beneficial to all 8 wards, all 700,000 individuals that live in Washington, is that instead of there being a concern, and I can't speak to individual property taxes or other taxes, we're benefiting from dollars being generated by visitors that are coming to the city that give us the wherewithal to focus on things, or give you all, the city council, the wherewithal to focus on things that are important, such as road improvement, security, healthcare, the list goes on and on. I think it's always better to grow the economy based on hospitality and visitors coming to the city, because it's a more short-term opportunity to see a return on investment, and especially when the city as a whole benefits. And I think the data proves that when we spent more in promoting Washington, and I think sometimes, and we understand agencies within the government that say, hey, their budget is this and our budget is here, and we are focusing on the needs of Washingtonians. Well, the reality is the city government gets the largest portion of the hotel tax. As you referenced, we get less than 1%. The largest percent goes into the general fund, which is over 10+%. So what happens when we spend more on promoting our city and we are seeing additional visitors? With the TRD in 2004, we saw 1 million additional visitors. 2024. In 2025, it was a more pivotal year, especially with the new government coming in place and all the new layers of concern and or rhetoric that has impacted Washington and impacted travel to the United States. Now more than ever, just like all the other cities in the US and the global cities that are going after the same visitors, the same international visitors, we see the best opportunity when we talk about growth economy, when the mayor talks about growth economy, tied to hospitality. And it's already been proven. Even the CFO in his comments made reference to the fact that hospitality continues to remain one of the brighter spots in terms of growth of our economy. So why cut us off at the legs when we are seeing additional momentum, additional dollars being generated, additional individuals being put to work because of these additional dollars that we're spending, and of course the city is benefiting from. So I think that it's extremely important to recognize that the spend that the dollars that we spend on marketing our city for conventions, international, domestic, and tourism, the return on investment is really for the citizens of Washington, D.C. And I'll turn it over to our chair for additional comments.
I think that's a really good question. Destination DC always needed more money, and we finally found a way to make it happen, and that's what the TRD was. And the reason it always needed more money is not only because we need to overcome what historically has been kind of a cold, people from outside of Washington, D.C. often think of us as being cold government buildings and monuments, when in fact there's so much more. And Robin and her team and others from a marketing perspective have done a great job with that. But it's DC is having a tougher time than other places in the US, oftentimes because of the administration, oftentimes because people don't feel as welcome coming to Washington, DC these days. Last year was a perfect example with Pride. We got probably a third to a half of the attendance that we probably would have gotten had it been a different time and place. And so when you look backwards last year with all the, all the headlines of we need the National Guard here, we are closing down the government, we are closing down, federal organizations. Somebody needs to counter that, and somebody needs to kind of lead that. And in my mind, that's always been Destination DC.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that, and I think I heard a lot. I particularly appreciate hearing the nexus of between workforce and having the opportunity to increase tourism, and how you see these dollars leading to workforce. I guess then I have to be concerned about, do you track the increase in workforce as it relates to the number of DC residents that land those jobs? Because it's one thing for us to continue to be the work engine for the region.
Mhm.
It's another for the region to understand we have to also take care of our people. And our unemployment rate is the highest in the entire region. And hospitality is so many different types of jobs, and most do not require, well, you don't have to have an engineering degree, let's put it that way, but you certainly do have to be trained, and you have to be dedicated, committed to the job, the task. So I wonder, do you track any of that? You have a way? All right, I want to hear that.
Morning, Council
morning.
Member Bonds. My name is John Kim, CFO of Destination DC. We've been tracking DC resident statistics for a long time. As of this year, January of 2026, 40% of all Destination DC employees are DC residents, specifically 116 people out of 289. And when you look into the full-time basis and part-time basis, the percentage is exactly the same. Full-time staff member, 47 positions out of 116 are DC residents. From part-time perspective, 69 out of 173 are also 40% are DC residents.
All right, well, that is for one period of time. Is that for 2026, first quarter, second quarter, or what is that?
This was as of January 31st of 2026. I'm happy to share our historical percentage. We have been answering these questions in every year's performance oversight, and I can pull how many years you would like to see. Actually, to be honest with you, this percentage has declined slightly as our organization has grown. It used to be somewhere 45 and 50% ranges. And this year happens to be 40%.
All right, and so you're saying that it has declined as the organization has grown. You mean Destination DC?
Yeah, in terms of the total number of staff and positions, yes.
And I'll speak, as you referenced, workforce development and whether or not we track it. The answer is we rely on other external organizations to give us feedback as to the number of jobs created specifically within hospitality. What we focus on would be two things. One, how do we continue to create opportunities for individuals to work in our industry. The more aggressive we are, the more visitors that are coming, the more conventions that are coming. Much to the chagrin of some hotels, new hotels are built, restaurants are open, retail establishments reopen, which we know we're in a phase where we need to see more of that. And I know that the mayor and the deputy mayor are working on that. So we don't track it individually in terms of what's happening within the industry in Washington, but we rely on external organizations, including DC government, to give us that information. I think one of the things that we focus on, and I referenced Next DC, formerly known as American Experience Foundation, is how do we play a role in making sure that students that are in high school, students that are in college, are exposed to hospitality. I think that, when I entered the industry well over 36 years ago, the perception is if you work in hospitality, you're going to be doing tours of the city, working in a hotel, working in a restaurant. All great opportunities, but what's missing is the fact that, restaurants need architects, restaurants need accountants, all the different career fields that are associated with hospitality that just don't resonate. And unfortunately, economists normally make the reference to hospitality being low wage, low paying jobs. Through Next DC, we're kind of reconnecting the opportunity or the narrative in terms of not only hourly jobs that are created, but also other opportunities within the industry that should be impactful. As an industry, we're still rebounding after COVID. We were the first to be devastated, if you will, by COVID, and probably the last to rebound because individuals are concerned about coming back into hospitality. But as was referenced, we all see and know what happened in 2025 with government jobs. Hospitality still remains one of those industries, especially in Washington, whereas we're still seeing that growth. The more we do in terms of promoting the city, the more visitors are going to come, and the more that the number of jobs are going to continue to increase. So I know that's a longer answer to your question, but I think it just required a little bit more perspective in terms of what our role is.
And I appreciate that. But Mr. Kim, I want to make sure that the numbers you gave me, you mentioned that it's declined a little bit as the organization has increased. What organization are you speaking of? Are you speaking of Destination DC?
Yes, Destination
Okay.
DC specifically.
And these numbers are your staff?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
I'm not into that. That's not what I'm asking. I'm really asking through your efforts and what has happened in the workforce of the city. Do you track it so that you know that the work that you do, your organization, the work that is the way in which you promote DC, that we can attribute any increase in employment through your efforts?
Yes.
And is there a way for you, if you don't track it, is there a way for you? I mean, I'm sure each hotel can say, well, that was a great ad. It's working. I've got 3 new employees. I'm just wondering if you collect that kind of data on an annual basis, or because that tells us how effective any organization is.
I think we may have to get back to you with statistics on that. I can tell you that employment at hotels and restaurants is directly tied to sales. And so as occupancy in the city goes up, a hotel will hire more people. But I don't have I don't have access to those stats, and definitely not stats indicating what percentage live in the city itself.
Just thinking would be very useful since we're all very into what does the dollar really pay for?
Mm-hmm.
And since the hotels increased their tax, I'm just wondering if it would not be useful for the hotels to know, okay, that increase in tax and expenditure to promote us what are we seeing happening with the workforce, particularly as it relates to DC? If you could begin to look at that, that would be so very helpful to us.
We can speak to that actually
Oh.
in two different ways. So we just released,
Who are you?
I'm
And
Robin McLean, the Chief Marketing Officer
All right.
for Destination
Okay,
DC. Thank you,
okay.
Councilmember Bonds. So we do track total jobs for the tourism and hospitality industry. And we just released this week those job numbers for 2025. So in 2025, there are record 114,013 jobs. That's up 2% over 2024, which was also a record at 111,500 jobs. So those are jobs that we are directly impacting as an industry, and that is showing that growth that you're looking for year over year. The other thing I wanted to share, just in terms of the
And can you also share of these numbers, DC residents? Do you keep data like that?
we can get back to you and try to break that down. I don't know.
That would be
at this
really
moment what-
helpful.
Yes, but to Mead's point, seeing the increase, you're experiencing it in hotels, you are hiring more people. And so just in general, for the district, there is a positive impact, but we will get back to you on that. The other thing I wanted to point out when you were asking about how can we show that impact year over year. So I just want to take you into my world, the advertising world, right? We do an annual return on investment study each year, and we work with the CFO's office, as Elliot mentioned, on that. So in our largest spending year in FY 2024, we had about $22.5 million spent on advertising. That generated the highest tax revenue that we've ever seen at nearly $47 million, and visitor spending also at record numbers at $555 million. And so we know from that study in 2024, we hit those record numbers. Last year, the budget went down a little bit to $19.5 million, but still generated $41.3 million in terms of taxes generated for the city and $470 million in terms of visitor spending. Now, the comparable year.
Let me just make sure I heard you.
Yes.
You said 41.3 million expenditure resulted in 470 million in sales.
I said 19.5 million resulted in 41.3 in tax revenue, and resulted in 470 million in visitor spending.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
yeah, I just
Yeah.
want to make sure I heard that 470.
Yes.
Okay,
So,
all right.
a very large amount, but down from the record year, the year before. But what I'm telling you is that what it shows is our impact. When we have a larger ad spend, we can have greater impact. And so this year, we do our annual ROI study in the fall after the fiscal year ends so that we can see the impact for that fiscal year spending. But this year we're at about $7.5 million in terms of the ad spend. The year that we can compare that to is in FY 2023. And what that shows you is an economic impact on tax revenue of about $25.7 million in 2023. From a $7.4 million ad spend in terms of tax revenue and $306.4 million in visitor spending on that $7.4 million in ad spend. So you can see the numbers come down by about half when you are comparing to the highest amount that we spend on advertising. And so there's a direct correlation we know from the ROI study that generates this direct impact on DC's economy immediately from people staying in hotels.
That's the kind of information that I think we want to hear more of. And if that could be coupled with a clear understanding as to what percent of new hires that happen on an annual basis are also DC residents, it would help us understand the impact of these dollars that are spent. You're right, things are tight. And while we're not broke, we're not at the top of the heap any longer.
Right.
And we all remember those days in the last 10 years when we've had surplus after surplus generated from sales tax, property tax, especially commercial property tax. And the situation with that now. It just so happens we have a few high-end salaried individuals that have chosen primarily through the new administration to be here, that we're able to keep things moving along. But any increase would be predicated on, if we spend it, what do we get for it?
Right.
And so that's why I'm asking these questions this morning.
Absolutely. And I'll just add that, everything that we do in terms of our spend, if we do a specific marketing campaign for the summer, there's a return on investment study done to basically focus on the efficacy of our efforts. The number of room nights potentially generated, the number of visitors, and the economics tied to those visitors that are coming into the city. So there's so much oversight in terms of what we do. We're always very conscious of the fact that we want to create opportunities for Washington residents. Of course, I don't need to say to you the biggest concern issue that is out there is, of course, the cost of living in Washington, D.C., especially for an hourly paid employee. And that's why we not only reference the fact that our industry creates hourly wage jobs, but also other opportunities. When a new hotel opens, a new general manager, management staff, they're coming into the market. And the list goes on in terms of how this industry creates opportunities at different levels, and therefore opportunities for DC residents to be able to afford to live in Washington, DC, because they want to live here. And of course, for us to be able to proudly say we're hiring, or the industry is hiring more and more DC residents.
Thank you very much for that. So with your office receiving just shy of 1%, 0.97, if you gained, let's say, 0.4, what would that do? How much would that generate?
Yes,
In funds that would come to you, and
Yes.
then how are you going to use those funds? I know Robin says she's going to just add us to death, but how are you going to do that? And what is your thinking about your locations out of the country?
Absolutely. I think the goal for us is, our board chair Mead referenced Washington being a city that individuals want to visit domestically and internationally, but speaking to the international market, we continue to focus on our reputation as a city. Well beyond whatever rhetoric continued in 2025 with this administration, Washington has been perceived as a great city for monuments, memorials, and museums, because we do have them. And a great city for a lot of things you can do for free versus other cities where you're spending in excess of $500 or more to entertain your family during the day. Our goal is to continue to focus on the diversity of your stay in Washington, D.C., focusing on theater, nightlife, outdoor activities, sports, restaurant scene, of course, being a strong convention destination, how walkable we are, how green we are, the list goes on and on. These things just don't automatically resonate with individuals that are looking at coming to Washington. They can't look beyond the person dressed in a suit talking politics on the National Mall, because they've been seeing it their entire life. So we have that layer that we've continued to focus on as pertains to promoting our city. The next layer is the fact that most visitors outside of the country are smart enough to use a travel agency to plan all of their travel. So just imagine a travel agency talking to someone and that person saying, I want to come to the United States. I want to go to New York. And they're selling them on a 3 to 4 day package to Washington, New York, and they're selling them on a day trip to Washington versus staying in a city. The negative for us, of course, is that we're not realizing the full economic impact of that visitor if they're only being sold a day trip, because the individual in whatever country that they're coming from doesn't understand the diversity of the stay in Washington. So the more we're able to bring more travel agents into the city, more journalists into the city, they're telling a different story about Washington as a destination. So those dollars are used in that space. The obvious space that we're not in right now is tied to television advertising. I don't think a day goes by where I don't see an ad for Orlando. Mind you, they have a $100 million budget. Visit Florida has the same. Visit California has a well over $100 million budget. And I just referenced the fact that Chicago's budget is now going to escalate to north of $80 million. So you compare that, and what they're able to do is, of course, the advertising that you see in our market, even Colonial Williamsburg, that has a huge budget, that we're not able to do. We're not able to do it domestically. And for those looking, you'll never see DC ads in Washington promoting DC, because we're trying to bring people from outside of the region. But I appreciated the fact that folks talked about going into the Philadelphia station and seeing how Robin's team played a huge role in promoting Washington throughout the station itself, 30th Street Station in Philadelphia, or the MARTA buses or trains in Atlanta being immersed in all things tied to things to see and do in Atlanta. And the list goes on in terms of what we were able to do with those additional dollars. So we'll go back to doing that. We'll be focusing more of our efforts, especially on those international markets. Just because it's down now, DC and Washington, the United States remains very aspirational. So even though the Canadians aren't coming now, the goal is with our office in Canada is that we're not spending much with them right now because they're not coming, but they will come back. And we want to be in front of that market and those markets that are returning. With conventions, of course, they're booking 5 to 10 years out. We just attended an event last night, and I was talking to one of my peers, and they're asking me, are you seeing bookings? We just booked a piece of business for 2040, and we laughed because we'll all be retired by then. But the point is, conventions book even further out. So there's a lot of momentum that we want to capture by still being relevant and marketing our city, and that's what these additional dollars will give us an opportunity to do.
Well, I appreciate hearing that, but I must say, I suspect that the attitude in this building is going to be, so there's this year, as proposed, where the amount doesn't change, because we're looking for better years. And I just thought I would inquire as to the dollar amount that you would benefit from if we move the dial from 0.97 to 1.2. Just curious if that generates any additional revenue. You've told me if you get it, you're going to be on television, maybe down in Orlando saying, come to DC, because we only have one day with day trips now. That's what I think I heard. So I'm just trying to understand, what does this additional revenue from the hotel tax, what would it really buy us?
Yes, absolutely. That's a very good question. And what we've done, because we've been asked that question before, what if you get 5 million? What if you get 10 million? And we've done several scenarios tied to, what if you receive, like this year we received $6 million additional dollars versus the 20 million that was tied to the TRD, which means we spent $14 million less than all the things we referenced earlier. I'm going to point to my CFO to tell me what that percentage would, how it would increase our budget.
During TRD time, the extra 1% on average generated about $23 million receipt for Destination DC. So if it goes down to 0.4% instead of 1%, from dollar perspective, that would mean about 9.2 additional million dollars to Destination DC.
So you would realize 9 million more.
Yes.
Potentially.
You,
right.
you expect,
Yeah.
okay, okay.
And that's predicated on the market continuing to move in the right direction. And yes, things in which we, no negative
Well, the
rhetoric.
market is up, if you're talking about that thing in New York, it's up.
Okay.
Okay,
It's
they
up
say
now.
it's up, so.
Yes. No, absolutely. And I
And you're
think,
supposed to take cues from the White House as they up and down things in our economy.
yes. And I'm, in that regard, I was watching CBS this morning, and they had the gentleman that's bringing the UFC fight to the Eclipse on the Mall in front of the White House. And the question is that the right event for Washington, D.C.? Is the Indy race the right thing for Washington, D.C.? And these are all things that the federal government is focusing on. And the reality is for us is that people will come, they will stay in hotels, they will eat in restaurants, they'll use transportation. So there is a direct benefit to those events coming to the city. You've heard us talk about protest tourism in the past, whereas a few years ago, that was not a term, but in Washington, because we know that in 3 months there could be a protest that is formed, and now you have 100,000 people coming into the city that are staying in hotels, eating in restaurants, et cetera, et cetera. So we are looking at these opportunities and saying, how do we make sure that they leverage their stay, not just come for the UFC fight, but come for a sporting event, come for a dining experience, a rooftop experience, speakeasies, all the things that really resonate when people are traveling and they look at cities like Las Vegas or New York. We want them to also be exposed to those things. And by the way, we've got several museums that are free, and of course our monuments and memorials are free. So if you're not spending a lot of money during the daytime on entertaining yourself, that gives you more money for shopping and other experiences in Washington. So that's a huge part of how we look at the events in which we're inheriting, thanks to the federal government, but we're leveraging in a positive way.
Well, thank you very much. The 7 locations that I think it's 7 or 9
7.
locations that we have. Are tourists from all of those countries coming to Washington?
The
I
answer,
mean, Brazil, India, China.
you are on a roll. Those are the places where we have offices. Australia, New Zealand, London, we have an office there. You said India, China, and Canada, we still have an office there. So not all tourists are the same. We have an office in Mexico. So South America, Mexico, Brazil, South America as a whole, strong momentum in terms of visiting the United States. Europeans, a lot of momentum, a lot of desire to come. There probably is a lot more concern in terms of, is it safe, the rhetoric, all the things that really that's out there. So we are focusing on those markets that continue to remain strong for us. India and China, if all things were perfect, would remain and would be our number 1 and 2 markets more than likely.
But it's down in those countries.
They are
correct?
down. It is visitation is down, but for a variety of reasons. One, visas, which you've heard several conversations within the federal government and from us about having to access a visa. 2, US-based carriers cannot fly over Pakistan or Russia, which means you cannot take a nonstop flight from India or China to the United States unless you fly Air China. And up until a few months ago, Air India, which temporarily
You
suspended
can go through
operations.
Istanbul.
You can, but there's a layover. So the point is that there's no longer a nonstop flight from those countries. And after you've been on a plane, and I can tell you this, for 15 or 16 hours, do you want a layover? So, for me, when we go to China, unless I choose to fly Air China, I have to fly to the West Coast with a layover. And that is a deterrent for international visitors with families, with luggage, with the concerns about traveling through the United States. So therefore, those numbers are down, but those would remain our strongest markets.
Okay.
We rely on U.S. Travel Association. We're heading to their show at the end of next week. whereas they really focus on interacting with the federal government in terms of how we would be more positioned more strongly if we make it easier for individuals to get visas.
Okay.
And the same with airline concerns in terms of fuel, especially for those international flights coming into the U.S.
So United Kingdom and New Zealand, they are smaller numbers, but they are still coming to DC?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the UK, clearly a strong relationship with them. The 250th, we are seeing a lot of momentum.
I
But
thought that was one of the reasons we had the king and queen here, that it was going to send a signal to those in those countries that come on over to the USA.
yeah, and I hope that that is the case. I think the biggest concern and what we've seen is that when we have journalists coming into Washington, international journalists, the first question they ask is, what's the process of going through customs? Because in their country, they're hearing it's difficult. Getting a visa is difficult. The concern about the reception of coming to Washington. We talked about World Pride. The reason why, as Mead was talking about the numbers being down, is because of the rhetoric about, from the trans community and other communities. And therefore, there was a lot of concern. Now, we had journalists come in town for World Pride, and we asked them to write about their experience of coming into the United States, which was not remotely similar to what they're hearing in their country about we're not welcoming. They had an amazing experience being in Washington, D.C. in terms of how welcoming the Washington community is, which is part of the reason why we're utilizing the local community to help promote Washington as a safe, friendly place for international visitors. So that's what our marketing is. We're able to address the concerns that the global market has in terms of coming to the U.S. Through marketing. And Robin, I'm going to turn to you for maybe additional dialogue.
Sure. So this week we talked about our international visitation numbers going down by 4%, but that beats the US percentage of 5.5% overall decline from international markets. And so the distinction there is that we are better able to compete and draw visitors away from other US cities. And so it shows that we are doing that more effectively. And so if that was $9.2 million, part of that certainly would go to directly impact that from the markets that you're talking about, where we have offices, maybe being able to expand into some other offices to help drive visitation to the US and be more competitive.
So
Really good. If I can just add, I'm sorry.
Sure, please.
They're really good at pivoting. So for instance, with limited resources. So if Canadians don't want to come to the US right now, which they don't,
Correct.
we don't market to Canada right now because that wouldn't be much of a return. So they try to get a jump on the areas that can be, that already are thinking they'd love to come to Washington.
So then who wants to come and who are we marketing to get them here?
Sure. The largest percentage of visitation still remains domestic visitors, well over 92%. The goal, as we talked about that 27.7 million record number for 2025, I don't think the goal for us is to have 50 million visitors come to Washington as New York and Orlando has. We don't have the infrastructure for that.
We don't have the
We would be
beach.
very mad. A lot of angry
This is
people.
soccer.
A lot of angry people.
And I'm waiting for you all to tell us when we're going to have a beach. I mean, I was wondering if you were lobbying the White House about the reflection pool with its new surface. It could be a great little place for kids to jump in. But then I remember too, the protesters may find a way to use it. So that may not end up being something very useful for us. But I agree, we don't have those kinds of attractions. So I'm genuinely very supportive of all of what you're trying to do. And I know it's very tough, and it's very tough in these times. But I'm also trying to figure out the justification for Destination DC as I have to present that to my colleagues.
Absolutely.
So I'm just being very
No,
straightforward.
I appreciate it. I will summarize the justification by saying it's not for Destination DC, it's for the citizens of Washington. It's for, again, the economic impact tied to visitors coming into the city is extremely important to all of us. I don't want my property taxes to go up. I don't want my income tax, my state income taxes to go up. If we're seeing stronger numbers tied to visitors impacting our economy, and might I add, a strong marketing campaign in 3 months, you're going to see the return on investment. With UFC, with a protest coming into the city, we're going to see a return on investment because, again, a year earlier, that was not on our radar. It wasn't forecasted within hotels in terms of occupancy and average daily room rate. So when we have these opportunities, Washingtonians benefit. Destination DC only benefits simply because we have those dollars to promote our city, and the 700,000 of us that live here benefit simply because the 10%, the 10.05% that goes into the general fund is used for services and goods that all Washingtons benefit from.
All right, and so what do we know about any increases in hotel reservations as it relates to the 250th anniversary? Are hotel reservations up or?
Yes, I can tell you that certainly around July 4th, things look very strong in the city. Instead of the Smithsonian Folklife Festival, we have the state fair, the great state fair that's going to be put on the mall, and that seems to be driving a lot of occupancy. So I think in general, the summer will be good. But yeah. So
So have you done any forecasting, 10%, 5% increase or 50% increase?
honestly,
You having to send people to Virginia and Bethesda
yeah,
or?
on July 4th, we are. I honestly, for the entire hotel industry, it's looking like a fairly flat year over year.
Okay.
And some of that is because inauguration is always, it's like our Super Bowl. So last year's inauguration is we can't get one every year, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I want to add one other thing. We talk about immediate return, which the marketing team does a lot of great work on, but the folks behind me work on conventions, sporting events, and so we need the resources so that 2027 is going to look good, 2028 is going to look good, et cetera. And
Okay.
that's one of the most biggest impact that can be done for the city.
All right. Well, I thank you very much. Let me just. Well, we want to thank you very much, Destination DC, for being with us this morning and sharing your having this discussion. I hope that we understand better, and I see your organization as being necessary and a part of our infrastructure. So I'm looking forward to being able to speak on your behalf at the appropriate time. So thank you very, very much.
Well, thank you,
Thank you.
Councilmember Bonds. And again, I want to end by saying thank you for your service for the last 14 years. I have a feeling this will be the last official time we're in front of you in this capacity, but not the last time we'll have your audience, because you're always very kind to all of us, Hotel Association, Restaurant Association, Events DC, and Destination DC, and understanding what we do to create jobs and, of course, the economic impact of what we bring to the city. So we appreciate you and your team for your service.
Thank you very much, and we certainly appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will now pivot to our next organization that we're proud to have an opportunity to chat with today. And that is that office called the Office of Campaign Finance. Got chapters here. Okay. Okay, did that. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. We are now going to hear from the Office of Campaign Finance. It oversees and enforces the district's laws and regulations governing campaign finance. Specifically, it administers both the traditional campaign finance program and the fair elections program. They are intended to reduce the impact of large donations in elections. Through this program, a candidate agrees to only accept small dollar donations from DC residents. This is the Fair Elections Program. But they may receive a match from the government of 5 times the amount of the donation. The Office of Campaign Finance conducts audit analysis and review of all financial documents filed in the programs. The proposed FY27 budget for the Office of Campaign Finance is just over $8 million, a decrease of 52% from FY26, their current budget, primarily due to the Fair Elections Fund match. And so we're very happy to hear from the director, Cecily Collier Montgomery, and I will now swear her in and her team. So if you raise your right hand, do you swear and affirm that your testimony and any statements that you make before us today to be complete and truthful? Thank you. Thank you very much. You may begin when you're ready.
Vaughn.
Yeah. And you can move it down to your, yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, Chairperson Vaughn and members of the Committee on Executive Administration and Labor. I'm Cecily Montgomery, Director of the Office of Campaign Finance. Appearing with me today is William Sanford, the General Counsel for the agency, Eric Jackson, the Fair Elections Program Manager, Than Hune, who is our OCF Financial Manager, Wesley Williams, who is our Operations and Policy Officer. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on the fiscal year 2027 proposed budget request of the Office of Campaign Finance. The proposed fiscal year 2027 gross budget for the agency totals $8,023,726 and 37 full-time equivalents. This represents a negative minus 52.3% decrease over the fiscal year 2026 approved gross budget of $16,838,290 due to the lower level of activity anticipated during fiscal year 2027 in the Fair Elections Program. The personnel services budget is $4,556,274, and the non-personal services budget is $3,467,452. The mayor's proposed budget includes the net increase of $51,069 across multiple programs to support projected salary and fringe benefits costs and personnel services, including the combining of 2 full-time equivalents into a new 1 FTE position with a higher salary to lead the Audit and Compliance Division. A decrease of $51,069 across multiple programs in non-personal services to offset the increase in personal services costs, and a one-time increase of $3,236,505 in the Fair Elections Program to support the public funding of campaigns during fiscal year 27. In each budget cycle, the need to adequately fund contractual services and personnel services remains critical to the success of the OCF programs. The NPS proposed budget of $3,467,452 will sufficiently support the cost projected, $3,236,505 for the last year of the 2026 election cycle, which ends on November the 3rd, 2026, the date of the general election. And the agency oversight support services, $230,947, based on current fiscal year 2026 expenditures associated with the procurement of needed annual services. The annual services for fiscal year 27 include will include the recruiting and staffing services provided by the Department of Human Resources at $34,728, fleet management provided by the Department of Public Works, $4,845.67, and the maintenance and upgrades for the OCF traditional e-filing and disclosure system, $69,960, and for the FEP filing system, e-filing system, $35,160. Notwithstanding the sufficiency of the proposed allocation of $3,236,505 in the fiscal year 27 budget to the Fair Elections Fund to support the projected costs of the 2026 election cycle, this amount will not support the payouts required for candidates who may register and be certified in the Fair Elections Program to participate in the June 2028 primary election during the 2028 election cycle. The 2028 election cycle commenced on November the 6th, 2024, the day after the November the 5th, 2024 general election. Election cycles 2026 and 2028 will overlap in fiscal year 2027, and it has been the experience of the agency that candidates begin to register in the Fair Elections Program in the calendar year immediately preceding the date of the primary election for which office is sought. The covered offices scheduled for election during the 2028 election cycle are the offices of the at-large 2 seats and ward members of the council, wards 2, 4, 7, and 8, and at-large 1 seat and ward members of the State Board of Education, wards 2, 4, 7, and 8. As you know, candidates certified to participate in the Fair Elections Program may qualify to receive base amount payments in contested elections and matching payments payable at the rate of 5-to-1, depending upon the number of qualified small dollar contributions collected. Matching payments are subject to a maximum cap based on 110% of the average expenditures per election cycle of the candidates elected to a specific covered office and a set number of prior election cycles. Base amount payments are prescribed by the Act dependent upon the covered office sought. The agency has preliminarily projected that the amount of $1,185,928, which represents 17% of the total cost for election cycle 2028 at a participation rate of 75%, will be required to fund the election cycle activity anticipated during fiscal year 2027. The agency previously projected that the amount of $3,236,505 with 75% participation would be required to fund the last year of activity anticipated during fiscal year 27 for the 2026 election cycle. This amount represents 10% of the total amount forecasted in costs for election cycle 2026. The projections assume that all certified candidates will reach the maximum cap allowed for matching payments for the office set and be eligible to receive the base amount payment. The 2028 election cycle projections for the covered offices of the at-large and ward members of the council and the State Board of Education require data from the 2024 and the 2026 election cycles. While the data was available for the 2024 election cycle, the data for the 2026 election cycle will not become available until the winning candidates are determined on November the 3rd, 2026, the close of the 2026 election cycle. At that time, the projections will be revised to include 110% of the average expenditures of the candidates elected in the November the 3rd general election to the offices of at-large and ward members of the council and the State Board of Education. In addition, the projections for the anticipated number of candidates who will participate in the 2020 election cycle for these offices will be based on the number of candidates who qualify for ballot access in the 2026 election cycle for the offices to be elected in 2028. Consequently, it is expected that the grand total for the projected cost of the 2020 election cycle will increase. By way of background, the office authorized the sum of $4,016,797.64 in public funds to the 32 certified FEP participating candidates during the 2020 election cycle. The 2020 election cycle was the first cycle of the implementation of the program, and the Board of Elections declared the FEP candidates the winners in 7 of the 11 seats for public office elected during the November the 3rd, 2020 general election. During election cycle 2022, the second cycle of the program, the agency authorized a total sum of $12,358,606.95 for disbursement from the Fair Elections Fund and base amount and matching payments to the 42 candidates who were certified in the program to participate in the 2022 primary and general elections. 52 candidates registered to participate in the program. 42 of the registrants met the threshold requirements and were certified as participating candidates eligible to receive public funds, and 37 of the FEP candidates qualified for ballot access. 27 candidates in the primary election and 10 candidates in the general election. The FEP candidates were elected and certified by the board on November the 30th, 2022, as winners in 10 of the 13 seats for public office elected in the November 2022 general election. During the 2024 election cycle, the third cycle of the program, the agency authorized the disbursement of the total sum of $2,834,646.15 from the fund to the 20 candidates certified in the program. The FEP candidates were elected and certified by the board on December the 2nd, 2024, as winners in 7 of the 11 seats for public office elected in the November 2026 general election. As of this date in the 2026 election cycle, the agency has authorized a total sum of $8,394,409.43 in base amount and matching payments to the 22 candidates who have been certified to participate in the June 16th, 2026 primary election 19 and in the June 16th, 2026 special election 3. The major cost driver for the Office of Campaign Finance is the Fair Elections Program. Participation in the FEP has shifted dramatically from the traditional campaign finance program, where candidates rely heavily on private financing. The Fair Elections Program is undeniably a successful program that has removed candidates from the rigors of fundraising and provided a greater opportunity for interaction with their constituents. Certainly, the availability and the timeliness of the disbursement of public funds to candidates who are certified to participate in the program is essential to the success of the Fair Elections program. The Fair Elections Act establishes timeframes within which payments from the fund must be authorized and distributed to certified campaign operations and prescribes dates for the filing of financial reports which may trigger payments from the fund. The failure to provide sufficient funding for the Fair Elections program will impair the ability of candidates certified under the FEP to successfully campaign for office. Therefore, the agency is requesting additional funds in the amount of $2 million to fully fund the projected costs of the anticipated activity of the 2026 and 2028 election cycles during fiscal year 2027. The additional funding will ensure that the goals of the Fair Elections program to provide an incentive for more candidates to compete in the electoral process, to encourage district residents to engage in greater civic participation in the electoral process, and to amplify the voices of district residents by matching qualified small dollar contributions are achieved. From a performance standpoint, during fiscal year 2027, the agency will monitor the campaign activities of the candidates and committees who registered to participate in the 2026 election cycle in both the traditional campaign finance and the Fair Elections programs. Following the November 3rd, 2026 general election, the agency will initiate post-election full field audits of the campaign operations of all FEP candidates certified to participate in the primary and general elections, and of all newly elected candidates to office who were registered in the traditional campaign finance program. In addition, the OCF will manage the remission of funds due within 60 days of the 2026 general election to the Fair Elections Fund. Consistent with our ongoing statutory responsibilities, the agency will oversee the reporting of the constituent services and the statehood fund programs, and will maintain the full range of mandatory operations in the areas of public information services, legal counsel and enforcement, auditing, and agency administration. The agency will also produce and publish at the OCF website the FEP post-election cycle report due 9 months after the November 3rd, 2026 general election. The report will list the names of all candidates who were certified to participate in the Fair Elections program and the 2026 election cycle, and describe for each the receipt of all small dollar contributions, contributions of personal and public funds, as well as the total of any remitted funds. In conclusion, the Office of Campaign Finance will continue to direct all of its efforts during fiscal year 2027 in unison to execute its responsibilities under the Campaign Finance Act in a timely, effective, and useful manner to achieve voluntary compliance with the Act and to provide the full, complete, and accurate disclosure of financial information. This completes my testimony. I will be pleased to entertain any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your patience with us talking with the previous agency. I know I was trying to figure out that money and how we, how we'll have more for what your needs are, because your needs are growing by leaps and bounds every
Yes.
time we have an election. Thank you very much for your testimony. I really appreciate you pointing out that one of the goals of the fair elections process is to generate more interest in the elections.
Yes.
And we think we're doing that because we have more candidates. And then you were kind enough to share for the public's benefit the number of those who participate in the program and those that end up actually being elected, so that they can see that There's sort of like a match, activity. If we're generating more candidates that go through the fair elections program in particular, are successful. So thank you for that.
Yes.
There's been a question about what is the real benefit? And so I wanted to, you put it on on the record. As it relates to the Fair Elections Program, I would like you to put on the record the number of candidates that have participated in the 22, the 24 election that still have outstanding records that are due to your agency, if any.
Okay, I would ask Mr. Jackson to provide that information, and we will make sure you get a complete record of the information if we're not able to do that at this time.
Well, actually, it's only 4 outstanding audits that we are currently working on from the 2020 election. It's 2 that we're working on from the 2024 election. And we finished all the audits in the special election of 25. And we actually finished 1 audit in the 26 election that has, where the candidate has come out of the race. He's
All right.
withdrawn from the 26 election.
And so the 4 that are outstanding from the 2020 election, what is the nature of, we're now in 2026? And will the statute of limitations will they get caught up in that, or we, the government, get caught up in that?
Well, I don't think so. I think they're coming to an end. We needed a couple of more bank statements and other documentations from most of those candidates. And they're actually sitting in my office for review to move on or actually be deemed as compliance or non-compliance.
All right. And so you expect to complete all of the compliance during this year, this FY
They
year?
they should be completed within the next month.
Okay, all right. And would you please notify the committee that you have completed these at the time that you complete them,
We'll,
since you're saying next month?
yeah, it should be next month because we'll have a little bit of a reprieve from getting payments out to so many people because the primary election will be over in a month.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that's what we have our hands for right now.
All right, and so the 2 that are outstanding from the 24 election, their status?
Well, their status is we've actually completed all the preliminary audits for that election. And most of the final audits, we're just looking for a couple of more documents for 2 candidates that remain either moving toward non-compliance more than anything. I actually think they have been referred to the general counsel's office, and we have scheduled hearings on them for non-compliance of providing documents. And that's
All right.
only 2 candidates for that election.
2 candidates that we classify as non-compliant.
Well, they're not non-compliance yet. We moved them to the general counsel's office for hearings. We're giving them a chance to actually provide the documents.
All right, and so the general counsel to the Office of Campaign Finance will conduct a hearing with.
Yes, once we schedule the hearing, we conduct the hearing, we bring the candidates in, and we try to ask them why they haven't been in compliance. We give them a chance to provide documents or even statements of why they're not in compliance. And we make a decision from the audit standpoint whether or not they're in compliance. Because most of the documents that we need are not legal documents. They're actually documents pertaining to things such as bank statements or merchant statements. so that
All
we
right.
can prove the income or the outcome of anything that went out.
All right, and so, Mr. Sanford, once you have completed that process, do you then send the information forward or report from your hearing to the Board of Elections? They still are, I guess, your bottom line, as far as having overseeing campaign finance and Board of Elections activities? Or the
Ultimately,
Office of Elections activities, I guess I should distinguish.
ultimately, it might go to the Board of Elections, but initially, we would complete the hearings and then arrive at a determination and possibly impose fines. And if there's a failure to comply within a specific period, the matter would be referred to the Board of Elections, to the General Counsel for the Board of Elections. And then they
Well-
could seek judgments in the DC Superior Court.
All right, so your action goes to the General Counsel of the Board of Elections.
It's after there's complete non-compliance. When there's
Alright.
non-compliance in a division, it's referred to us.
Yeah,
And then we have hearings and give the respondents an opportunity to comply with the requirements of that particular division. If they fail to, then we issue orders imposing fines. If they fail to pay the fines or meet any other requirements in the order, we refer it to the General
Okay.
Counsel of the Board of Elections.
all right. I just want the public to hear that and to understand that, because for some, they're still wondering why we do not have the board of the Office of Campaign Finance up and running. It is still law. And so they're very curious. So I wanted to put it on the record as to what's going on in our government. So thank you very much for that. Thank you. Do you feel that there is a need for this board for the Office of Campaign Finance?
Well, we have always taken the position that the board and that the Board of Elections and the Office of Campaign Finance are so connected because both of our functions are related to the conduct of elections. The board, of course, actually conducts the elections, whereas the Office of Campaign Finance is responsible for the campaign operation of the candidates who participate in the election. So it's always been our position that the responsibilities of the Office of Campaign Finance are so connected to the Board of Elections and Ethics that we have always taken the position that the administration of the agent or the oversight of the agency should remain with the Board of Elections.
Okay, thank you very much. We glad we've finally put that on the record, and we can move forward in answering that question. If I think you're telling us today that you need $2 million. The $2 million you need would complete whatever payouts that we must do fair elections for the 26, I guess it's the general election. You have enough to take care, you believe you have enough to take care of the primary candidates that are participating in fair elections for the June 16th election. But you may not have enough to take on additional candidates, which we may have more that will participate in the general election, the November 26th. Am I correct?
You absolutely. At this point, I believe that we have remaining in the fund close to 4 million, but we did request that an additional 5 million be included in the supplemental, the fiscal year 26 supplemental budget to assist with the payouts and the matching funds and base amounts that we may be required to authorize for the general election, because we certainly anticipate that with the general election, candidates who are independent will will register to participate in the program as independent candidates for the offices to be elected in the November election. And then also we expect that the candidates will be registering for the office of state member of the Board of Education to participate in the November election as well. And I'm sure that those registrations will probably start coming into the office after the primary election, because the nominating petition process for the independent candidates as well as the State Board of Education candidates will start, I believe it's sometime in June. But I do know that the
Yeah.
filing deadline for the filing of the nominating petitions for those candidates is August the 8th. And August the 8th is also the deadline for those candidates to qualify to participate in the fair elections program.
And do you anticipate any or the advisory neighborhood commissioners also participating?
No, because the statute does not provide for participation of members of the advisory neighborhood commissions in the fair elections program.
Okay, and as a former commissioner and someone who was authorized to be a part of this government when we set up the home rule, you know, I've gotten that kind of question. So what are we doing here, DC? You're excluding us from, have you had to entertain that from some commissioners?
Well, I would imagine that, just considering that off the cuff, that it may have a lot to do with the fact that their contribution limits are, I don't want to say small, but the contribution limit for an ANC member is $25. So it could have a lot to do with whether public financing is really needed for the Office of Campaign Finance, for the Office of Advisory Neighborhood Commission member to be able to competitively participate in the electoral process. But I would also ask the general counsel to
Yes, thank you.
comment on that as well.
No, I would agree with the director's characterization. However, early on in the process, we did receive a number of inquiries from candidates for Advisory Neighborhood Commission. But generally speaking, they seem to have accepted the fact that it is not something that would be practical because the 5-to-1 match for an office where the contribution limit is $25 just does not seem to be a very practical approach at this stage.
All right, so I could give a commissioner $5 and they would get 5 times 5 and they would have, or give them $1 and, you know, I hear what you're saying. Because they're held to receipts of $25 total.
Per contribution.
Yeah,
Right.
per contribution.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, the same, the statute has that for Board of Education. Isn't it $25? State Board of Education, $25?
No, I think for the Board of Ed, it's 50.
It's,
Well, in the fair elections program.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Because, what has happened is, well, in the traditional campaign finance program, the contribution limits are much greater. So the contribution limits for the fair elections program are reduced. And so then you have the matching process, which kicks in with respect to the 5-to-1. So in terms of the advisory neighborhood commission member candidates, their contribution limit is already at $25. So I see what you're saying in terms of would we reduce, would their contribution rate in the fair elections program be reduced to $5? And then if they were subject to the cap, the 5-to-1 would increase their contribution to $25. So I certainly would not want to rule that out. I think it's something that the council would have to consider.
Yes,
'Cause
I.
whatever you do, we would be there to enforce.
Oh,
it
I know,
and
I know, and
administer it.
thank you
Yeah.
so very, very much for that. But that is some talk that I've heard. Because, you know, we're now very, very anxious and very conscious of making a fairness
Yes.
and giving individuals an opportunity for that. I see my colleague, Councilmember Parker, who is also my council member, Ward 5. You know, I have to cheer for us. And I'm sure he wants to say a few words. Council member, 10 minutes, will that do you?
That will do. Thank you, Councilmember.
All right, go right ahead.
Thank you, Councilmember Bonds. I am interested in better understanding the Office of Campaign Finance's financial picture and where there are gaps within the agency as we enter election season. And the use of ranked choice voting, it is important that we are able to ensure necessary funding to support our elections. And so I just wanted to provide that framing. In particular, I'm concerned that there appears to be a one-time enhancement from last year that was removed that would cut more than 50% of the fair elections program, which in my assessment could very well disable the ability of the agency to provide the election and campaign programming our community needs. So with that, and I know some of this may have already been covered as I just jumped on, for our witnesses, at a time when the city is transitioning to ranked choice voting as a voting method, what impact might a reduction of 8.76 million be made to the Fair Elections Fund? If you could just spell out what impact that might have on the program should that cut be sustained.
Okay. Let me start by saying that the 16 million that we were given in, I believe it was fiscal year 25. In fiscal year, I'm sorry, not in fiscal year 25, in fiscal year 26. That was given to or allocated to the Fair Elections Program because that's when we expected the greater amount of activity in the 2026 election cycle. So that amount also was based on the projections of the agency in terms of the funds that it would need in order to fully provide for the matching fund and the base amount payouts that it would make during fiscal year 26 with respect to the 2026 election cycle. That also has a lot to do with the fact that in the 2026 election cycle, in fiscal year 26, we also had the debates. We also had the nominating, the qualification periods for both the primary election and for the general election. Both of those periods, we had the deadlines for. We also had close to 14 filing deadlines, which also would trigger payouts. And also we had a greater number of elected, a greater number of elected offices to be handled or elected during the election, the 2026 election cycle than we have in the 2028 election cycle, beginning in the first year of the cycle, which would be fiscal year 27. Also, for fiscal year 27, that is the last year of the activity for election cycle 26. What we have in fiscal year 27 will be the actual election, the November election, and we only have 3 filing deadlines, which may require payouts for the 2026 election cycle. So saying that to say the greater amount of activity occurred in fiscal year 26, so the greater amount of funds was required in fiscal year 27.
We don't anticipate there being as many candidates next year in fiscal year 27, and so the cut reflects that. Although it strikes me that there could be any number of special elections, 2, maybe 3 special election, high-profile special elections for fiscal year 27. Would the agency have sufficient resources to maintain the fair elections program should there be those special elections next year?
No. If we're required to fund special elections in the fair elections program for fiscal year 27, no, we would not have adequate funds to do that. And at this point in time, we have, usually our calculations are based on an actual election cycle. So once there is, or once the board certifies that a special election would be required during fiscal year 27, then at that point, we would do the projections for the calculations in terms of the funds that would be required.
And just to paint the picture of what I'm talking about, there are several current council members running for various seats. Should one of them win, which chances are they might, that would then open up or trigger a special election. But what I'm hearing from you is if the budget is kept as is, there wouldn't be sufficient funding in the program. Let me ask this. What is the current expenditure for the fair elections program to date so far in fiscal year 26?
Okay. So as of this date in fiscal year 26, we have expended close to the $9 million in terms of payouts from the fund.
So roughly $9 million. Do you all have a breakdown of how many individuals have received an expenditure from the Fair Elections program that either didn't make the ballot and or has withdrawn from the race?
Yes, we maintain from the OFRM a listing of the payouts that are made for each candidate.
But do you have an assessment of how, to this date, how many candidates received fair elections funds and the amount that either didn't make the ballot or they have been disqualified or they have withdrawn from running?
You want me to answer that?
Yes, we had that information as well. In terms of
what is that amount?
Well, at this point, we have revoked the certification of one candidate, but who registered to participate in the program and was certified to participate in the program, but the candidate did not receive any payouts. All right. With respect to one candidate who withdrew from the program, I think Mr. Jackson can provide the information with respect to any funds that that candidate may have received.
And not one candidate in particular. I guess what I'm getting at is if you're saying roughly $9 million has been expended from the Fair Elections program, my question is what percentage of that has gone to folks that will not be a part of the election for any number of reasons, namely because they haven't made the ballot? Is that $1 million, $500,000, several $1 million?
It's about $110,000 for one candidate that received a payout that withdrew. that can't, actually it was about $150,000. That candidate remitted 100 and, off the top of my head, over $100,000. He remitted back after he withdrew. It's, I believe that it's 0% that did not make the ballot. Everybody that certified in the Fair Elections Program, I believe, made the ballot.
Understood. Okay. Let me ask this. How how are FTs affected? And I know I'm running out of time for this round. How will the FT cuts impact the agency's operations?
You talking about
proposed
employees?
FTs. Yes. How will the proposed cuts to employees and staff impact the agency's operations?
Want me to answer that?
I don't believe we have any cuts.
Okay. Let me look at that again. And Councilmember Bond, I'm out of time. I do have like maybe 3 other questions, but I'm happy to wait another round.
If you have your questions ready, we'll take your questions because I just have a few.
Okay.
I think the director's testimony is very, very clear on their need, and they have put in a request for an additional $2 million that I know you are going to help me find so that everything will move along rosy. And
Yes.
we haven't heard Board of Elections or the Elections Office. I think they need a little more than 2 million. So we are talking close to, maybe 4.5 million we got to come up with. As a champion of the new elections process, I'm sure you're going to help me with that.
I'm gonna do everything I can, Councilmember
Alrighty.
Bonds. On that point, though, but can you just spell out? I heard the part where there's $2 million needed for the general election. What might be the consequence if we aren't able to find that money? Are we to assume that you won't be able to operate the fair elections program in the general election? And if you can also just speak to why the gap of the $2 million. Is it that it wasn't budgeted? Is it that you're over budget and what you assume might be spent so far in the fair elections program? So what is the impact and why is the $2 million needed?
Okay, so with respect to the 2 million that is requested for the fiscal year 27 budget, is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay, so when the agency submitted its calculations for the cost that would be required for the 2026 election cycle, we asked that the total amount be allocated across fiscal years 24, 25, I'm sorry, 25, 26, and 27. Okay, so part of the amount that would be needed in terms of the 2 million is to ensure that we have enough funds to cover the amount that we calculated for fiscal year 27 for the 2026 election cycle. And then also
I get that, but is it that we didn't fund the agency appropriately enough last year, or are you over budget?
no. What happened, and also I would say that the amount includes the first year of activity that we anticipate for the 2028 election cycle as well. So our projections are based on the 110% of the winning candidates' expenditures who participated or who qualified for a ballot access and were the winning candidates in, depending on the office sought. And for the council, it's for 2 prior elections cycles. So based on those figures, as well as the figures that we calculated for the 2026 election cycle, which included, for example, for the offices of mayor, chairman of the council, and the attorney general, we had to look at the 110% of the expenditures of the successful candidates over four past election cycles in which those offices were elected. So we basically come up with our projections prior to the budget cycle, and then we submit the projections. The projections also, what we do is we submit those calculations based on the assumption that all of the candidates that participate in the Fair Elections Program will qualify for the ballot, meet the matching cap, and also be eligible for the base amount payout for the full amount.
So I'm clear on how you identify your projections. I'm assuming you did that for the fiscal year 26 budget. So if you're saying now in the middle of an election, hey, we need $2 million more dollars, that either means one of two things. Either you didn't have enough at the
No,
beginning
what
of
I'm,
this elections process, or you've spent more than you assumed you would so far in the primary process. Maybe there are more candidates than you anticipated. And I'm just trying to get a sense of what is the pressure that has caused the
okay.
$2 million gap.
All right, perhaps I misunderstood your question, but what happens again is with these calculations, we submit the calculation. We have not been given the full amount of the, we have not been approved for the full amount
got it.
of the calculation. So that is what has happened.
I see.
And I would say also that during the first several election cycles in which we administered the program, the Fair Elections Fund was non-lapsing. So there was a carryover. So whatever funds were left in the fund at the end of a fiscal year were carried over into the next year. And that always served as a cushion in terms of the funds that we needed for the subsequent fiscal year. That provision of the act was repealed. So
I got it. I got it. That is super clarifying. That's super clarifying. So in other words, you submitted your projection and it wasn't fully funded. And as a result,
yes.
there is a gap now that hopefully with Councilmember Bonds' leadership, we're going to find that money. Let me ask you this. If we are not able to find the money, will you run the Fair Elections Program until existing funds are exhausted, or will you just say there is no access to the program in the general election?
Could you repeat that question?
So hypothetically speaking, there is a $2 million gap. I'm assuming there will be some funds available, but you need $2 million more, anticipating the independent races, the state board races, all of the things. Would you, if you don't get the money, would you run the Fair Elections Program until whatever existing funding is exhausted, or will you just announce that no one will be able to qualify for the Fair Elections Program, if that makes sense?
Well, if that circumstance was to occur, there are no provisions in the Fair Elections Act which currently address what should happen when the fund is depleted. In our legislative recommendations, we have recommended that the council amend the Fair Elections Act to give the director the authority to act when the fund is depleted. You know, whether it would be to, at that point, to adjust the matching cap, or whether it would be to, and also adjust the 5-to-1 payout. So those are things that should be considered. In Maryland and in the counties, I think of Baltimore and also Prince George's, in their fair elections program, their statutes give their directors of the authority to adjust the fund or the mechanism in terms of calculating what the payout should be when it appears that the fund may be depleted. But our statute at this time does not address that.
Fascinating. Okay, that is very clarifying. It also is a bit daunting that if I'm running in the general election, I may or may not know whether or not the program is going to be available and or what resources, the amount of resources. But I totally understand the constraint now. One other question there. So just zooming out, what I've gathered is in the current budget, there are insufficient funds for the fair elections program for any special elections should they occur in fiscal year 27. Is that right?
That's correct. At this point, our budget does not include, our proposed budget does not include any funds in the event there should be a special election called.
And then I'm also understanding there's currently a $2 million gap for the 26 general election, in part because the projection that your team provided wasn't fully funded, either by the mayor's proposed budget or the council's approved budget. And now there's a gap. And should there not be a way for us to fill that gap, there will be an impact to the program's availability in the general election. Is that right?
That's not absolutely accurate. Let me just say this. When I indicated that we would require an additional $2 million to fund the Fair Elections Fund, it was for not only the 2026 election cycle, but the 2028 election cycle, the first year of activity that we anticipate for the 2028 election cycle during fiscal year 27. During fiscal year 27, election cycles 26 and election cycle 2028 overlap. And so because of that, there was a need for additional funds. The proposed budget for fiscal year 27 actually in the amount that's allocated to the Fair Elections Fund is actually covers probably almost 95% of the cost that we project for the 2026 election cycle. For the 2026 election cycle, we projected that we would need close to, I think it's 3.3 million. And the amount that's in the proposed budget is 3.4 million, but that also includes monies for our administrative costs. So we're really not short that much with respect to the 2026 election cycle. It's the 2020 election cycle, 2028 election cycle that we projected that we would need close to $2 million for the first year of that cycle.
See, that is clear. So that $2 million gap is more so impacting the first year of the 28 election cycle.
That's correct.
Okay, this is illuminating. I know I see the clock. If I could just ask one last question and I'll just leave it here. Thank you for being gracious, Councilmember Bonds. I'm trying to now figure out which question to ask.
Well, we can come back to you. I really do have some questions and
Okay, I'll leave it
you're
there.
going to be looking to me to come up with monies, so.
Yes, I'll leave it there for the sake of time,
Okay.
but thank you again, Councilmember Bonds.
All right, thank you very much, Councilmember Parker. I do want to have us put on record the fact that when a election cycle begins, when does it really begin? Because it is the impression in the public that on the close of the election, for instance, on November, I think November 3rd,
Mhm.
2026.
Yes.
November 4, 2026 can begin the new election cycle. Is that pretty much how it's handled?
Yes, that's correct. And I also, that's how the election cycle is defined by the statute. But what happens is even though the new election cycle will begin the day after the close of an election cycle, realistically, candidates don't usually register for the new cycle until the year immediately preceding the calendar year in which the primary is held for the next election. So we usually don't see any activity until the second year. And so that's why our calculations are always focused on the second, the third, and the fourth year of the election cycle. But I did want to get back to your question about the advisory candidates for the Advisory Neighborhood Commission member. And I just wanted to point out that I'm sure that a lot of that interest has to do with the fact that with our community outreach program, we do quite a few presentations at the Advisory Neighborhood Commission members' meetings. And at those meetings, we discuss the Fair Elections Program. So I'm sure because of that, there is a lot of interest in the program, and I'm sure that the candidates for ANC or the ANC Commission members probably question why their office is not included in the Fair Elections Program.
All right, and they're not included because it was not in the fair elections law that we passed. Am I
That's correct. They're accepted
So-
from it.
In theory, they do not have to be excluded.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I
Okay.
just want to make that clear. The discussion you just had with my colleague about, the
What?
potential for running
I'm
out
sorry.
of funds and why we have to continue to pay attention to this program has a lot to do with the number of candidates that we get. And as you said, the more we publicize the
Mhm.
new day of the district, the more people will want to participate in it. That makes sense.
Mhm.
And that was, of course, at least it was explained that was one of the aims of it. I understand that the provisions that are utilized in the surrounding jurisdictions as a way for managing this. I wanted to get your input on whether or not if we could use legislation to reduce the match down, let's say, we're at 5 times, which is the most generous in the country. And we like to do things, we're like that. That's our nature, or so it seems. So if we were to go down to 3 times, would you, with the current request of the 5 million from the supplement, 26 supplement, plus the 2 million in the FY 27, if we went down to 3%, would we anticipate having enough for the 26 general election and then moving into the 28 cycle? Because you have shown us through your data that each election cycle, we almost doubled the number of candidates that participate.
That's true. To answer that question, and I would ask the input of Wesley Williams, who also works on our projections and our calculations, and also Mr. Jackson. But in terms of the Fair Elections Act and the current provision, I think I would also look at the 110% figure that is used in order to calculate the cap for the matching funds. Whether it would be more effective to reduce that down to perhaps, we looked at, for example, 75%, because you still want to be competitive. You want the candidates in the fair elections program to be competitive with the candidates in the traditional program in terms of the monies that they raise so that they can continue to have successful campaigns. So that's something that we may want to look at too, in terms of, again, we currently use, or we calculate the matching cap based on 110% of the expenditures of the winning candidates in the prior election cycles. So Wesley and Eric, what are your?
So the question is, if you reduce it from 5-1 to 3-1,
Yes.
what would the cost be?
Would that allow the agency enough resources to get through what you project to be the need for the 28 election cycle and also finish up the 26 election cycle?
I mean, just based on numbers alone, it's going to reduce it. So I guess you could say it would make it somewhat more easier, but I don't know if if we would still have enough money.
You may still need more money.
It's a
Yes.
possibility. I mean, just off the top of my head, you'd
Yeah,
have to run the
yeah,
numbers to
Yeah.
make a final determination.
I asked this with great interest because as we're talking to voters, particularly those that come out for ranked choice voting forums that the Office on Elections is doing, we also are getting some feedback on, like how much more of my tax dollars are going to be spent this way. And I hear you say that we want to be fair and we want to give people the resources that they need. But I'll tell you, taxpayers are not very excited about that concept. And I have to be honest about that, particularly when some of my colleagues are floating the idea, maybe we need a tax increase. And so remember, we in DC, we eat each other. We don't have corn. We don't have other resources. It's what we put into the hopper that gets distributed for the programs that we say are so important. So I just wanted to kind of, ask about that. And I'm hearing you, Mr. Williams, so we may still need more to go into the fair elections program, even if we were able to, and even if we look at the 3-1 as opposed to the 5-1. But also, you're suggesting if we use 75% as the match, that might also reduce it more. If you have some information that you wanted to share with us, we would be very happy entertaining it because I do think our generosity may have hit a brick wall.
And I do believe that for the 2026 election cycle, we did compute the calculations using the 75%.
Okay.
So we could probably get that to you so
That
you
would be
could see
great.
that. Because, long-term, you may want to look at, again, reducing the percentage
Yes.
from 110% to 75%. Or, again, reducing the 5-1 to a 3-1 match.
Right. And if we were able to do that reduction, I would assume it would be a reduction prescribing the 2028 election cycle, which begins in 27.
Okay, all right.
I
So
would
then
think.
we will provide you with those calculations for the 2028 election cycle so that you can see what the projected cost would be if we reduce the 110% to 75%. And again, I would point out that with our projections, again, we assume that all of the candidates participating in the program would reach the cap, the maximum cap, and also would be eligible for the base amount payout. So our projections do tend to be inflated, but they have provided a protection for us to ensure that we have sufficient funds in the Fair Elections Fund. A
All
cushion.
right. Yes, thank you. So
Mhm.
that means that we're talking about the matching cap, and we're talking about as such the potential of maybe not 5 times, but
Three.
3 to 1.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Um, Oh, we just have a few. Now we're going to real questions. We were talking about from your testimony, and thank you. You pretty much covered everything in your testimony. Um, The mayor has proposed making changes to the fair elections program to making an FEP candidate, which is fair elections, personally liable for base and matching payments if they are decertified. And so, can you speak to any circumstances under which a candidate in this program has been decertified? I think you used the term revoked a candidate. Would that be the example?
Right. With the recent revocation that we've had in terms of the revocation of the certification of a candidate who was in the program, with that particular certification, we did not make a distribution of funds to that particular candidate. With the other situation that was referenced by Mr. Jackson, that candidate terminated his candidacy. He withdrew from the program. And I believe in that situation, the candidate returned a substantial amount of the funds. With the other revocation, I think Mr. Sanford could address that. That was in a prior election cycle. And again, the candidate remitted the majority of the funds.
Okay. And
The other revocation occurred when that candidate was disqualified and prohibited from seeking that particular office.
yes. All right. Thank you all very, very much for your attention and dialogue with us today.
Thank you,
Ms.
Councilman.
Montgomery and team, thank you
And
very much.
If I could just also add and chime in on the remarks of the agency that appeared before us, I also want to thank you for your service and thank you for the years that you have been the chair of the committee that has had oversight over this agency. It has been a pleasure working with you.
Thank you.
And we're going to miss you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to miss you all. You're all going to have me crying. Thank you.
Thank you.
And next, we will have the honor of talking with the Office of Elections, where the Board of Elections dwells. And all ears are wide open. all attention is focused on this important agency that for many years has been the sleeping agency until election year. And what they have before them today is an implementation of a new elections process. And they are, I must say, a little tired of us, the citizens of DC, just questions. But we're very pleased that they are able to take a little time from the preparations to be with us today. Thank you very, very much. And so we will swear the team in, and thank you again for being here. So if you raise your right hand, and we will get to it. Okay, do you swear and affirm that any testimony you make before us today be truthful and complete?
I do.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And you may proceed when you're ready.
Thank you. Greetings, Chairperson Bonds, members of the Executive Administration and Labor Committee and staff. I am Monica Evans, Executive Director of the DC Board of Elections. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to comment on the board's proposed fiscal year 2027 budget. With me today are Terry Stroud, the board's General Counsel, and Paul Blake, the board's Agency Fiscal Officer. As you know, the Board of Elections is a charter independent agency composed of a 3-member board and a small but dedicated staff that carry out the agency's mission. The Board of Elections' mission is to enfranchise eligible residents, conduct elections, and ensure the integrity of the electoral process. The mission, mandated by federal and local statutes, is carried out through the operation of the District of Columbia's voter registration system, the administration of the ballot access process for candidates and measures, the delivery of comprehensive public, media, and voter information services, the maintenance of technical systems that support voting, ballot tabulation, and electronic mapping of election district boundaries, the planning and implementation of each District of Columbia election, and the performance of legal counsel, rulemaking, and adjudication functions. The board is scheduled to conduct the November 2026 mayoral general election in FY 2027 for mayor, delegate to the United States House of Representatives, at-large members of the Council of the District of Columbia, 2 seats, ward members of the Council of the District of Columbia, wards 1, 3, 5, and 6, United States Senator, Shadow Senator, United States Representative, Shadow Representative. In the event of a special or recall election in FY 2027, there are currently no available funds in the board's proposed FY 2027 budget to conduct such an election. With this in mind, I would like to gently mention that there is a possibility that the board may be required to conduct special elections in FY 2027. Our fiscal year 2027 proposed budget. The FY 2027 budget for the Board of Elections totals $13,503,839 in local funds and supports 66 full-time FTEs. The board currently has 3 vacancies: communication specialist, office manager, and ADA coordinator. These vacancies are actively being filled with a tentative start date of June 2026. FY 2027 presents major challenges due to rising election costs, even as the agency's mark has been reduced. As you know, the BOE indicated that this funding level would not support the 2026 general elections and the agency's day-to-day operations. The board outlined in a needs assessment memo that an additional $2.2 million would be needed to cover operations and election costs. Historical budget data show that the BOE has required more than $15 million annually to cover operations and election costs. The 2.2 million in spending pressure stems from increased operating costs, including postage, printing, voting equipment, maintenance, support services, rising IT hardware and software licensing and subscription fees, technical support needs, and the need to implement ranked choice voting, which has not been funded in FY 2027. Help America Vote Act funds. We currently have approximately $70,000 in the board's Help America Vote Act fund balance. Most recently, BOE was informed by the U.S. Election Assistance Commission that DC was eligible for an election security grant of $819,000. Funding would be required as far as a local match of $163,000. To date, BOE has not submitted an application for the funds, but will do so as soon as possible. HAVA funds, however, may only be used for the administration of federal elections. Therefore, the passage of the Local Resident Voting Rights Amendment Act, allowing non-citizens to vote in local elections, restricts the use of HAVA funds for these elections. Mail ballot elections. We will continue to implement the many adjustments made in the past. We have been funded to continue all mail ballot elections. We have procured the services of an experienced mail house to assist with this task. We will continue to use the 55 mail ballot drop boxes that have been placed throughout the District of Columbia to voters, an alternative to mailing their ballots or voting in person. We will utilize early voting and election day vote centers for voters who prefer to vote in person, for voters who do not receive their ballots, and for those who need to take advantage of same-day registration. We will open 25 early vote centers and an additional 50 vote centers on Election Day. Voters may vote at any location through Election Day. Ranked Choice Voting, or RCV. As you know, Initiative 83, which was passed by the voters in the 2024 general election and funded by the council in the FY 2026 budget, will be implemented by the board beginning with the 2026 primary and special elections. The implementation of ranked choice voting has and will continue to require the board to perform ongoing massive and enhanced outreach, training, informational messaging through various mediums, and other necessary adjustments to the board's overall operation. This has also involved modifications to the election management software systems, including tabulation and reporting modifications. We will continue with an intense communication plan to inform voters about ranked choice voting, as well as reminders about updating voter registration, the use of mail-in ballots, mail ballot drop boxes, early voting, and other necessary information that may involve changes to Election Day operations. Again, the costs associated with implementing RCV has not been funded in FY 2027. Enhancement requests. During the FY 2026-27 budget development phase, BOE was not permitted to submit any enhancement requests. However, in the FY 2027 capital package, BOE requested $2.5 million one-time and $90,000 in ongoing maintenance to replace 450 aging express vote ADA ballot marking devices, which are 10 years old and at the end of their useful life. The express vote ballot marking devices are essential for ADA compliance and for ensuring accessible voting for individuals with disabilities. The current machines have issues, including unresponsive touchscreens that frustrate voters and undermine confidence in the election process. Malfunctioning equipment also directly erodes public trust, especially as BOE implements ranked choice voting, which requires highly responsive and accurate ballot marking devices. Ranked choice voting and aging equipment increase the time each voter spends at the machine. This makes machine responsiveness even more critical to prevent delays and long lines. Replacing the express vote machines will ensure a modern, secure, and efficient election system that protects ballot accuracy, supports accessibility, and maintains the credibility of the district's electoral process. Partnerships and support. The board has always received support from the Department of General Services, the Office of Disability Rights, the local and federal departments of Homeland Security, the Department of Transportation, the Office of Contracting and Procurement, the Office of the Chief Technology Officer, Metropolitan Police Department, DC Parks and Recreation, DC Public Schools, DC Public Libraries, the Department of Motor Vehicles, the Department of Public Works, Sweep Division, and other government agencies. We continue to remain grateful to these agencies for their ongoing support of election operations. In closing, Chairperson Bonds, I underscore the importance of our work as a customer service agency. The board is committed to delivering quality service. The board will continue to educate district residents and protect the rights of voters. We will always strive for continuous improvement as we serve the residents of the district. The integrity of the electoral process depends on our ability to be properly funded. Finally, I would be remiss if I didn't state the Board of Elections consists of a small but dedicated staff, all of whom work extremely hard to meet the challenges that each election cycle brings. I am pleased to answer any questions you may have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director. And let me again express my personal condolences to you on passing of your mom. And on behalf of all of us who will be voting, thinking about voting, and who cherish the opportunity to vote in this community, we too are expressing our condolences to you.
Thank you.
We didn't expect to see you, and that's a tribute to the outstanding work that is necessary before you and that is executed with our election. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to see if I understand where we are with your money. You heard me earlier say, help me to my colleague, Councilmember Parker, with getting you, I knew that you needed 2.1 million, is that correct?
That is correct.
And that would be for, well, let me start. I understood that was the request, I think, through your needs assessment memo. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and that was added to your FY 27 budget.
No,
that the mayor prepared.
We had a shortfall in our FY 26 budget and a shortfall in our FY 2027 budget. The mayor addressed our FY 2026 budget, but we continue to have a shortfall with our FY 2027 budget.
Okay, so I don't need to look for close to 5 million, only 2.1 million.
That is correct.
Okay, this is revolutionary. Thank you. Thank you for that. And I hope my colleagues are listening so that they will understand what we really have to do. The money from the, what is it, the HAVA, the federal dollars that stipulate they must be used in a federal election, are any used, or how are they used, let's say, in our delegate election, which is our federal election, and would any be expended for the 26th ballot?
We have been able to use some HAVA funds with our operations where we are actively engaged in the preparation of elections. We need to be careful as far as prorating, because HAVA funds can only be used in support of federal elections. And so now that we are operating local and federal elections, we have to make sure we make those distinctions. And so, for instance, the mail ballot packets that we send to voters that include federal elections, that would, for instance, be an allowable expense. Preparing the ballots for non-citizens to vote in local elections would not be an allowable expense. So we have to look at how we are preparing, and we're having to make some adjustments, and even with some of our advertising costs as well, and the target population regarding the desired recipient of that information.
So if you are prorating how you use this money, does that mean it's based on the number of non-resident registrations would be a percentage that you could exclude, or?
Not necessarily. The easiest way to do the proration is to look at the costs that really address federal elections. And so that is the easiest way to use HAVA funds in those areas, because even with our contract with VR Systems, and they house Voter Focus, our voter registration database, we have a separate portal that is used to house our non-citizens. And so there's some aspects of our operations where it's very easy for us to make that distinction. And so we don't have to actually go in and prorate the use of vote centers and prorate the use of, flyers that may be in vote centers, that type of thing. So we really try to focus more so on those big ticket items, because it just makes it easier and cleaner to provide that information in the event we're audited.
I appreciate you putting that on the record for all of our community accountants, so that they know, neighborhood accountants who are always, trying to figure out where the dollars are going. So thank you. That was the nature of that question.
Absolutely.
Want to make sure. I wanted to, when we talk about the cost of doing an election, and we consider this a big election year. It always is a big election year for the district, because when we have the mayor, the council chair, attorney general, these are elections every 4 years as opposed to every 2 years. So I wonder, can you share with us what the cost is for the mail ballot program, the cost for the 50 vote centers that you add on election day, the cost of the ballot drop boxes? Do you itemize the activities that go into the election in that manner, so that we can learn how the total budget for an election is really spent?
We do have those specific numbers. I don't know that I have all of them right in front of me, but for instance, mailing ballots to all registered voters usually runs us right at about $1 million. And so I can get the specifics for the mail ballot drop box placement and for that program. And we have a wonderful partnership with DPW as far as the placement of those boxes. We do own them, so it's not a purchase. It's just a matter of working with DPW to get them placed. We do have to hire additional staff to make sure we have enough individuals picking up those ballots from the mail ballot drop boxes. And of course, on election night, we need at least 55 individuals to ensure each mail ballot drop box is closed exactly at 8 p.m. So, but we
Okay.
can get you an exact breakdown
All right.
of all of those items that go into.
All right. And we've used drop boxes for a few years now. I would imagine that some may need a little repair. So if you would include that in the listing of how we spend elections money for these elections, it would be very useful. I really am hoping that the public will show an appreciation for all of the parts that we have in order to make these elections work.
Yes, and we did have to buy some additional mail ballot drop boxes during the last election cycle due to vandalism and some normal wear and tear.
All right. Thank you for that. You also mentioned modifications to the election management software systems, including tabulation and reporting modifications. If we could get itemization that tells us what that cost is, it would be helpful.
Yes, I can get that itemization. A lot of that has to do with the implementation of ranked choice voting and the display mechanism to ensure that voters can accurately and easily understand results as they're posted on our website. We've been working with DataNet to help us with that portal and the display function. I do have some of the costs at hand, but to ensure I'm providing comprehensive information,
All right.
I will get that to you as well.
All right, thank you very much. And so I just want to be clear, what is needed in order for the 2026 election in total to happen is this 2.1 mil.
That is correct.
Okay. And that would take care of the express vote ADA ballot marking devices, or is that an additional 2.5?
That would be additional.
That's what I thought. So I'm getting back to
The
Five-
number is
5 M,
increasing.
yes,
Yes,
5
it
M.
is.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I thought we were getting off easy and that I had made a miscalculation. Okay, all right, okay. And the 2.5 is a real number that you really have to have
That is.
in order
real-
to see us
That's
through.
coming from the vendor, correct?
Yeah. And I'm assuming that it's going to be extremely important with this election as more people are inclined to get assistance with voting. I can imagine we'll have long lines of curbside voting, as an example. And so are these devices used at curbside voting, or is there something else that's used there? The
Yes.
poll pads are different?
Yes, so the express vote machines, the 450 we're looking to replace, those are the machines that are the ballot marking devices in the vote center. And
Okay.
so those are the machines that are used for ADA purposes. They are equipped with headphones so that those who are visually impaired can hear the ballot. And there have been problems that have been increasing with the adequacy of the touch screen, where it's becoming increasingly difficult to mark your choices, and it's taking longer to mark choices. And we saw that in the 2024 election. And as we've talked to the vendor, they've said that it's aging equipment, they're 10 years old, and it's time to replace. And so we already know there are going to be longer lines, and it's going to take longer to vote using those machines because we're ranking candidates. So instead of just selecting one candidate for a contest, you're selecting up to 5 candidates per contest. So that's more selections per contest, and with touchscreens that are already showing signs of not being responsive, that has the potential to increase the wait times even more.
All right. So the express vote is really the devices inside the polling site that people use, and their favorite. Whenever I go to vote, there's a line for that. So I just go do the paper and I'm out of there, and the line is still waiting because it's such a favorite, because you can vote faster. All right, so that's the 2.5 that we need.
Yes.
And we need to do that in this budget cycle.
If possible, and one of the reasons I say that, we do need lead time. So once we have the money, the vendor would have to ensure that the equipment is available, installed, calibrated. And so there is some work for that to be done prior to deploying the equipment. So the
All
sooner we get the
right.
money, the sooner we can roll out the machines.
Okay. Give me a timeline, please, that I can understand as a lay person. When do you need the resources in order to consummate this arrangement with the vendor? And when will the vendor have the equipment operational, since we start early voting June 8th and today is the day before May 8th?
We would not be able to deploy new equipment in time for the primary.
All right, so this would be for the
So
general.
we would try to get new equipment in place for the general election. That is correct.
When our volume of voters' participation increases.
Exactly.
All right, okay. All right. But you have a guarantee from the vendor that if, well, we really will not have a passed budget until late June.
Right. It all depends on timing. When we spoke to the vendor, they could accommodate us, but they have other election jurisdictions also trying to get equipment. And so the sooner we have an answer, the sooner we can solidify things with the vendor.
So if the answer comes following June 8th, really, if the answer comes, that's the first vote on the budget. I doubt if it would change from June 8th to the 23rd. So what is your timeline? When must you notify the vendor so that we can have this operating equipment by our November 3rd election? Well, really before then.
Yes, I would think if we have a commitment by June 8th, that would be enough
You
time
need a June
for the
8th
month of June.
commitment.
But we would have to confirm and give that revised date to the vendor
All right.
because we don't know what other requests are coming in from other jurisdictions at the same time.
All right. Would you also check with them so that we have something, and if they could provide you with something in writing that stipulates they need it by X time, that would help in the presentations that I have to make to my colleagues.
Absolutely. I can get
Okay.
that to you in short
Whatever
order.
that date is. All right. Thank you so much. The poll pads are a different device. Do you have functioning poll pads? And now you've got a line of 10 cars. Can you do 10 simultaneously at any one
Yes.
election location center?
We recently updated our poll pad machines, and so we have
Okay.
adequate poll pads and curbside printers to accommodate curbside voting.
All right, excellent. You mentioned in your partnerships and support section of your testimony that you received support from a number of agencies, DC agencies, but you also mentioned the Federal Department of Homeland Security. What do they do for our election?
They have been very proactive in providing threat analysis to us. And as information is coming from other jurisdictions, we are notified so that we can be proactive in doing the things that we need to do to ensure voters and staff and the residents of the District of Columbia have measures in place to prevent threats, or so that we can mitigate the chance of threats coming to DC. And so a lot of what they provide is just information on foreign actors, any intelligence they may receive that would be helpful as we plan and helpful to us, for us to make adjustments in the way that we operate and allowing us to put additional security measures in place.
Do you have any indication from the Federal Homeland Security Agency or any other federal agency that we may have federal agents at any of our election locations during this election?
We have not received information directly from Homeland Security or from federal agencies. Of course, there has been information in the public domain that ICE agents or other federal agents will be at vote centers around the country. We have been following and working with other jurisdictions and other partners as far as the likelihood of that happening. We are told that it likely will not materialize, that it is probably an attempt to get people to self-suppress and not show up at vote centers. But a number of jurisdictions are already prepared for litigation should such presence appear at vote centers, because there should not be any armed individuals at vote centers providing measures that will intimidate individuals from potentially voting. And so we are closely monitoring the landscape, but we are hopeful, as the current communication seems to indicate, that it's probably more of a threat than a true likelihood of happening.
Have you had conversations with surrounding jurisdictions as to whether or not they are poised to address this situation should it occur?
With Maryland, that's the only jurisdiction so far. And we have information that came from another jurisdiction, but not direct contact with another jurisdiction.
All right. And so you and I know that every day, the National Guard, who are armed, are just walking through the neighborhoods. I am pretty sure they will continue to do that. Do you have any protocols that your staff has given in the way of instruction as to how to manage that? If for some reason or reasons that residents are prepared to vote and feel like, oh, they haven't heard all of the announcements, they don't know that this is routine, that the National Guard is always walking the streets, but now, well, do we have a way of managing the everyday that may occur and seem new and different to some of our voters that may select to come out to a polling site?
Absolutely. It has been included in our election worker training. So our election workers are prepared if they see something that appears to be inappropriate or unusual, to make sure they reach out to BOE headquarters so that we can get someone there and address the situation if they feel uncomfortable or if they feel as though there are any types of intimidation efforts. And also, we're very clear about maintaining order within the perimeter of a vote center. And so even if there is a presence, that presence should not be inside of the vote center or within 50 feet of the vote center. And so we are going to do everything we can to ensure that individuals can vote in a safe and environment where they're not feeling intimidated. We have heard that some organizations, particularly groups working with the immigrant population, are encouraging people to use mail ballot drop boxes and drop boxes at vote centers instead of actually voting in person, to avoid the potential of running into a scenario that may be uncomfortable.
Is the plan that we will have MPD at each of our polling locations for doing early voting and on election day?
They are not typically at each location, and we also try to not provide additional intimidation, because just the presence of MPD can intimidate certain individuals from going into a vote center. But they do patrol, they do ride around, and they can be seen at the perimeter, just going from vote center to ensure that everyone is safe and that there are no issues at the vote center, but not stationed directly at a vote center.
If there is a disturbance at a vote center, how do you reach security quickly?
Yes. We have, our site coordinators have been specifically trained to de-escalate any situation at a vote center. They have cell phones where they can directly reach members of our staff. They have protocols to reach out to MPD if it's a situation where MPD needs to be called in, but that is a routine part of our election worker training. In the event something arises, what they need to do. We've had situations in the past where we've had to evacuate a vote center for a moment of time. And so that is something that we do anticipate.
Thank you very much for putting all that on the record because we're at a different point in history each time we have an election. So I just want to make sure that, whatever is needed, that we have thought about it and are prepared for it. Also, I think we all know what Public Works does as one of the support agencies. But how does the Office of Chief Technology help Octo? How does it help you?
Yes. So Octo, with our information systems, and so they provide a lot of the support in working with our Office of Information Technology to ensure we have proper communications. We work with them as far as our website and basically anything that is technical in nature. They will assist us on the back end. They do not directly provide our web services, but we are in communication with them. Even when we had the data breach some years ago, we worked very closely with them and they were able to assist with solutions and best practices. And so we do communicate with them in a number of ways.
And what about the Department of Transportation, DDOT?
As far as assistance with some of our locations and
Yes.
our MOUs.
All right.
And then, of course, with our street signs, when we actually have the vote center set up, we will have areas designated for curbside voting. We will have areas with restricted parking. And so they assist with those efforts as well.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I think we can. Okay. Think. Again, I just want to make sure the $13.5 million budget for FY '27 does not include the 2.5 million that you need for the 450 electronic voting
The express
through the
vote machines,
express
correct.
vote, yes,
That
which is the favorite of everyone who comes into the vote.
Yes, and very important for ADA compliance.
Yes. All right. Like what? In the 2026 supplemental, I believe, you submitted 3 enhancement requests with limited success. What were these amounts and for what? I believe one was increased poll worker compensation that was not funded, replacing the aging and damaged voting booths, And then modifying the office expansion. So are these the three enhancements?
Yes, and we actually were able to get funding for all with the exception of election worker compensation.
Okay. So election worker compensation, is that the overtime package?
No, that
No.
is the,
Okay.
the stipend that election workers whose staff our vote centers are paid. And so we did an analysis of what election workers are paid in other jurisdictions. And we were trying to increase the stipend they receive for working at our early vote centers and election day vote centers.
Are we having a difficult time in recruiting election workers?
I would not say we're having a difficult time, but there are quite a few complaints. A number of our election workers have been working for years. They are seasoned. They're very good at what they do. And they keep asking, we've been working for, a number of years without an increase in what we receive. Cost of living is going up. Everything is more expensive. It would be great if we saw some increase in what we receive as we serve the residents of the District of Columbia. And so we, absolutely hear and hear what they're saying. And so we did bring that forward to try to get some sort of increase for them for their service to Board of Elections.
And so the training for each of the roles that play out during the election on site and the other services that are provided through volunteerism, I'll just call it that. They're trained each year, correct?
Yes, each
That we have an
election.
election, yes.
Yes,
they
so
are
we train
trained.
them ahead of the primary and then train them again
Okay.
ahead of the general.
So if you're not seasoned, you still can be a elections worker. It's great to be a seasoned, but
Absolutely,
Okay.
because the training we provide is very comprehensive, and then there's a knowledge exam at the end of the training.
Okay.
So we're able to ensure that each person deployed to a vote center has the proper knowledge for the position for which they've been trained.
all right. And so we should encourage people to continue to sign up.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Want to make sure. I believe you requested 15,000 for $15,000 for the primary. This was that additional compensation for your poll workers.
I know we didn't get it. I would have to go back
Yeah.
to the 26
It's
request. I'm
Page
sorry, I'm focused on-
29, question
I'm-
27.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was focused on.
No problem.
20. Yes.
Okay, and so for $15,000,
No.
how many additional poll workers could
Okay.
you?
And I want to be
Cover.
clear, the $15,000 that was requested here was not for an overall increase to election workers. This was really for supporting RCV at in-person voting locations.
So help me understand what that means, supporting.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So one of the things we know, and I'm sure you know as well, we've been doing a lot of voter education and outreach around ranked choice voting. And we've been doing it in a number of different ways, virtual, in-person forums, informational materials, commercials, our website, app, mock ballots. But we know that no matter how much we do, individuals will absolutely show it at a vote center. They will look at the ballot and say, what is this? And so we know that we have to be prepared to provide additional voter education and outreach at vote centers because we don't want to turn people away. We don't want people to show up at a vote center, get frustrated by this new ballot, get frustrated that they haven't heard anything about it and leave. So we are specifically training our site coordinators at our vote centers to provide additional information. We will have a video available at our vote centers that will run on a loop so individuals can get additional information. We'll also have informational materials at vote centers to ensure that a voter will feel comfortable and confident with that. We're really hoping that mailing a ballot to each registered voter will assist individuals in knowing about ranked choice voting in the event that they have not tuned into any of the outreach efforts that we have been trying to implement across the city. But just looking at that mail ballot, that gives you a good sense of what you need to know when you show up, even if you're voting in person. And we're even encouraging individuals to use that mail ballot as a vote plan, even if they don't want to vote that mail ballot, because that will allow them to do research ahead of time and they can even show up to vote in person with that in hand. And that can essentially serve as a vote guide for them.
All right, you said a lot of good stuff. One, that the site coordinators will get some additional training.
Yes.
And that's what the $15,000 will be used for. And so there'll be a site coordinator, each of the, I think it's 50 locations or 75, 50 plus 25 or
Well,
something.
25 during early voting, a total of 75 on election day.
Yes, okay. And so will each of these, okay, so what is this additional monetary amount that you thought would be very helpful to the site coordinators?
I believe it's only $50 per site.
A little
coordinator.
extra,
Yes,
just a little for your
exactly.
pain and suffering, because you're going to get pain and suffering. I
Absolutely.
can tell you, I have heard from folk who some have said, I've been to the training twice. Okay, and I still need, I said, well, be sure to come out with us on the 23rd. We'll be at the convention center and I'll also have lunch for you. So maybe we'll get, we already have over 100 RSVPs, so we know we're going to have at least a good crowd. So this will be their third time, I'm assuming.
Yes.
And hopefully it will stick. But I would imagine it would be useful too if at these, if we could, 75, I'm socialistic in my approach. So at the 75 locations, if we could have the video on the wall, so I don't know if that would be a
Yeah, we-
disturbance for those who are trying
Yes,
to
we
vote
plan
or.
to absolutely have the video available. As far as the mechanism for
Yeah.
having it, that's what we're
Yeah.
working with right now. It may just be on a few poll pads and individuals can listen to
Okay.
it and sit down at a station and hear the
All right.
video. But we will have informational materials there as well, and then someone who can answer questions. And I usually go out on election day to different vote centers, but now I know it's going to be very critical for me not just to go out and make sure everything is running smoothly, but I too and other members of staff will be positioned at vote centers to assist with providing ranked choice voting education.
All right, and so we want to make sure that our voting stations also have space where we can have people to sit down, and so that's a new kind of twist for our vote locations.
Absolutely.
But we want to make sure that that happens. And if you need us to speak up, speak out on that. Although I think you already have the, just a second. I think you already have an agency that is, nope, I don't see the Department of General Services that could partner with you and make sure you have tables and chairs at all of your locations.
And
This ought to be a whole government engagement is
Yes.
what I'm thinking.
And we have adequate equipment at our warehouse location that we automatically deploy to vote centers.
All right.
So we should have that covered.
All right, so no new agency participation. All right. So this 15,000 is not included in the 2.5, or is it? Or could it be absorbed?
We have pretty much absorbed that for the 2026 budget, because that's
in the
2026,
supplement.
not 2027, correct?
Okay. You had indicated that there was no access to the potable water at the warehouse location on V Street. But there are 7 employees that report to this location. What are we going to do about this? What's your suggestion here?
Yes, well, fortunately, we did get additional space that was occupied by DCPS. And so that is space where we conduct our logic and accuracy testing. And that space does have adequate bathroom facilities and also a kitchenette. So as long as we have access to that space, we do have potable water and adequate bathrooms.
All right, so I know that the V Street has 2 locations, sort of like, are they connected? I don't remember if the 2 warehouses are connected
Well, it's very
without
interesting.
going outside and going around.
So 3535 V Street comprises an area that is housed by DC Board of Elections and an area that's housed by DCPS. And so it all has the same address. And so we did get some of the space that was occupied by DCPS, and that's the space where we're conducting our logic and accuracy testing. The bathrooms we now have access to, and the kitchen facility and an office space there. So we do have additional space we did not have access to in the 3535 V Street. We also have another location that is not connected, that is a little further down V Street, that houses our mail ballot drop boxes. But other than housing our mail ballot drop boxes, we have turned all of that space over to DCPS. So it was kind of like an exchange, if you will. And so now they have control of that space, and they moved a lot of their equipment and clothing and supplies that they had in the 3535 space to the space that we occupied. So we pretty much just use our auxiliary V Street space to house the mail ballot drop boxes, but we do not use that for any other reason right now.
So the big warehouse that I had the honor of touring a few years ago is now being used by public schools.
The big warehouse, 3535 V Street, where we house our voting equipment, we're still using that space,
Okay,
but we're also
okay.
using a little extra space there that was vacated by DCPS.
Right,
And
where
so
we
now
saw the
they have
logic,
taken-
yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right, and so you just mentioned then their 3rd location for the big,
A
okay.
smaller warehouse location has now
Okay.
been occupied by DCPS. And then we only use that location to house our mail ballot drop boxes.
All right, and so then the big question is, how much has your rent increased? Mr. Blake?
The rent is handled by DGS, so it's under their portfolio, so it doesn't come out of the operating budget for the Board of Elections.
So it comes out of the capital budget?
No, DGS has a separate, excuse me, a separate real estate portfolio across the district where they pay for all the agencies. And so it doesn't come out.
So it doesn't come out of the agencies any longer?
That's correct.
Yeah, at one time, each agency was an amount for this, and then you had utilities. So you knew I was going to ask this question, so.
Yeah.
All right, and in your work, has DGS equated more of a cost for the space that because you have increased space usage of DC property. So I'm just curious, have they indicated that, let's say, last year or 2 years ago, it was 65,000. Have they said now it's 85,000, what they equate in space costs?
They haven't come knocking for money, so.
So you only answer when they ask for money. I got it. That's a good way to manage this. I'm very curious because, as you know, we have a huge rental bill with outside of DC government space that we lease. Okay. I don't remember that we own all of the warehouses along V Street. So that might mean that there is lease space that we are using. So I'm very curious about that. So I will try and go to DGS and get that information. Because it's kind of important. As you know, most recently it was pointed out that the CFO's office has a number of locations, a whole building, building and a half, and even space in this Wilson building on one of the floors. Space here hasn't been touched in more than 2 years, but it's in their inventory. And when you're down on your dollars and you've got to manufacture more dollars because there is an expectation in the public, you really have to do a full accounting for every penny. So that's why I was asking that question, to see if one of my agencies was a culprit, not using space that they had been allotted to them, and what is the monetary cost. But I hear you. So DGS is playing the heavy now, and so we'll find out from them. Not particularly about this agency, but you manage the books of most of the agencies in my committee, so that's why I'm looking at you and sharing with you.
But the one thing I would like to mention and put on the record, DGS has been very helpful in our efforts to identify space and actually consolidate our headquarters location with our mail ballot processing unit and getting us additional space as our FTE numbers grew. And I can have nothing more to say about them than just a positive working relationship and interaction and engagement. And they've just been incredibly responsive to the needs of Board of Elections. So I did want to just put that on the record. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. And it leads me then to, let's talk a minute about how you're going to manage the 100 of election observers that will be on scene the evening of June 16th.
And when you say the evening, are you talking about at vote centers or once?
Some
vote centers
they're
have
coming to
closed
your
and coming to
headquarters.
our headquarters?
Yes.
Yes, so one thing, we are going to host a media day the week of June 1st. And we really want to set the expectation about what election night will look like, what you will see election night, and what you will see in the days after election night, just to help us with proper messaging. One of the things that has often been articulated on election night would be election night winners in different contests. And a lot of people are a little upset because they feel as though we will not be releasing election results and announcing winners on election night. The one thing I can say, DC Board of Elections has never called an election or indicated a winner on election night. That may be a campaign, that may be the Associated Press. But even now, particularly with mail ballots being able to be counted as long as they're postmarked by Election Day, we can still receive those mail ballots up to 10 days after the election. So we know on election night, we will not have all ballots in hand and all ballots processed. And so we really want to make sure, in particular, that media outlets and even campaigns understand that, and that we are not delaying the information, but we were not issuing that information to begin with. But we are anticipating people who will be very interested in election results. What we will provide on election night will be all of the in-person votes. And so that will be all early voting votes and all election night in-person votes. We will also be able to provide all mail ballots that have been processed up to election night. However, we know that we will likely get, tens of thousands of ballots on election night through our mail ballot drop boxes and through the U.S. Postal Service. And we need to be very clear that mail ballots that we get on election day will not be processed on election day. One, we have 100% signature verification in the District of Columbia. So once we get mail ballots returned to us, we have several steps we have to go through before we're even able to determine that that's a ballot that we can count. And so that ballot will first enter our tracker. After that ballot enters our tracker, we have to remove the flap over the signature. We have to run that ballot again to collect that signature image. And then we have to verify that signature with signatures we have on file. Once we're able to verify that signature and determine that this is a properly voted and returned ballot, at that point, we open envelopes. We remove the secrecy sleeve from the outer envelope. At that point in time, we can no longer trace that ballot to the voter. And that is for protection of information. So we do not know how any particular voter voted in any particular election. Once we're able to do that, then we can take the ballots out of the secrecy sleeve and begin the processing and running them through our tabulation equipment. And so it does take amount of time. We may get 30, 40,000 ballots on election night. Even on election day, it's very busy as far as depositing ballots in our mail ballot drop boxes. We typically have 2 pickups on any given day with our mail ballot drop boxes. On election day, we've increased it to 3 pickups because our mail ballot drop boxes tend to be overflowing with individuals preferring to deposit their ballots on election night. And so in addition to doing the media training, we will have a document that is prepared. So anyone who comes to our office, they'll be able to understand the process, understand the information they're going to get on election night, and understand how we will be releasing additional information. We always update information as we process additional mail ballots, and we will continue to do that. We just have to be very clear that we will not issue any final election results until we have all ballots in hand, particularly with contests that are subject to ranked choice voting, because you need all ballots in order to run a final round of tabulation. We also know that there will be some contests that will not be subject to ranked choice voting because they don't have 3 or more candidates in that race. And so that will be a lot easier process as far as individuals being able to project a winner. However, we still will not declare a winner until all ballots are in and we're able to certify the election.
All right. Thank you very much for that. And I hope everyone was listening. When you talk about the tabulation equipment will be used after the verification of the ballot signatures, how will the tabulation equipment be used? What does it do?
So we have a DS 950. So once we get ballots, our ballots are run through machines, and we have a software package, RC Tab, that will be used to help us tabulate contests that are subject to RCV. And so this is not new equipment. This is equipment and software that other jurisdictions have used. We have tested it. We are continuing to test it to ensure it produces adequate results. One of the things that I think a lot of voters may not know, every piece of equipment that is deployed to a vote center goes through logic and accuracy testing at DC Board of Elections. And so we run a test script using the actual ballot to ensure the proper results are produced. If there is ever an anomaly or anything that is not proper, that piece of equipment is never deployed to a vote center. That piece of equipment is never used. So we do a lot of testing with equipment up front to ensure that it's producing the correct results. And so with using RC Tab and using our DS950 tabulation equipment, we will be able to tabulate ballots. And then we're working with our vendor DataNet as far as the display of information on our website so that individuals can see information as we provide updates. And we are devising a picture, if you will, that will clearly explain the different rounds when it comes to looking at the RCV results. But one of the things that we caution with RCV, you may see interim results, but you need to know that those results are not final until we have all ballots in hand and we indicate that that's the case.
All right, so then the ballots run through this equipment, and you then can say in the first round, this is the result. So does the ballot go through the equipment another time, or 3 times, or 4 times, or 5 times? In order for you to, as I think it's been described, as the 5th place candidate drops off.
Or not necessarily the 5th place, but the candidate in last place.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean.
Yes.
The person who's in the last slot.
yes.
Or has received the lowest number.
Exactly,
Okay,
exactly.
maybe that's a better way to
Yes,
describe
the
it.
fewest number of votes, correct.
Okay.
So on election night, we will just issue the first round results. So that would be voters who voted in that first column. Once we get,
So we will not see any results of who is in the second column.
we will not see
Or in
rounds of
second place.
tabulation that
Okay.
first night, because that first night, there are going to be too many outstanding ballots for that to be meaningful. Because with getting, 30, 40,000 ballots on election night that have not been processed through the mail and mail ballot drop boxes, if we ran rounds of tabulation, they would be highly inaccurate at that point.
Okay,
And so to ensure that we're not sowing seeds of confusion or causing people to question the integrity of the process, and because that early round would be so highly not indicative of what further rounds would indicate, we really want to make sure we have the majority of those ballots processed.
so those
we-
ballots that are processed and available for viewing, the results of that processing to the public will be their markings for first place,
Correct.
but their markings for second place, third place, fourth place, fifth place, if it's on the ballot, that will not be revealed at that time.
That is correct. And
Okay.
for some of the voters, we never move to their second, third, fourth, or fifth place choice. And so one of the things that we're really trying to make sure people understand, you may rank 5 candidates, but you only have 1 valid vote at any given time.
Okay, thank you very, very much, because there have been all kinds of variations in the community, really. And this is called Eureka now. We're finally getting to what we will actually see. And that's, everyone, I hope you heard the director. She is making it very clear. Whatever you mark in your first place, it will be what you will see. You may mark in the second, the third, fourth, and the fifth place, but you may not see that.
You may
In
not.
fact, you will not see that. You will only see the first marking in the first category.
Correct.
All
And the
right.
only time we move to a voter's second, third, fourth, or fifth choice is if their first choice comes off of the ballot in a round of tabulation due to having the fewest number of votes in that contest.
All
And
right.
as long as their candidate remains in that contest because their candidate is not the candidate with the fewest number of votes, we would never move to their second, third, fourth, or fifth choice vote.
All right, I hear you. I think what you have said is so important that whatever you marked as your first choice, that is what you're going to see.
Absolutely, and
All right.
we can't emphasize it enough.
Yes.
So essentially, you're selecting your first choice and backup candidates in the event your first choice has the fewest number of votes. You still have an additional voice in that contest.
And mathematically, it is unlikely if there are 5 or more candidates that your first choice, my first choice, would exceed 50% plus one, or with 50% and move to having one more vote. That's what this is the calculation that they're making in the community that is very unlikely.
It's
because there's so
unlikely, but
many
not
candidates.
impossible.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, now we know the system we're using. I hope everyone is very much paying attention.
Yes, and Councilmember, if I may just take a moment, if there are people who do not understand, we're asking them, please go to the DC Board of Elections website. We have a lot of information there. If you are someone who understands ranked choice voting and you talk to someone who says they may not have heard about it, they may not understand it, please direct them to us. The last thing we want is for people to not vote because they have some anxiety about this, because we are here to explain it, and we will explain it as many times as we need to.
Thank you. I've heard that the little dots, moving the dots helps people to understand that too.
Yes.
But today I want them to understand, mark someone in that first column, and that's what you're going to see on election eve, the 16th of June.
Yes.
And then you'll see subsequent updates as more ballots are actually counted. So that, what you have, it may change. That first round may change. But the important thing is you know what you're going to be looking at on the eve of the 16th of June.
Correct.
So thank you. We have a concern about the ANCs. The ANCs are very, they're distressed that we've already had a couple of vacancies reported where commissioners have resigned or had to, or left the city, and so there are vacancies. And I know we've had conversations with you in the past about how we might do this. So we were wondering, do you, when you're notified, because it is predicated on you being notified by the commission, when you're notified, do you issue any information back to the commission reminding them they have the 6 months prior to an election period when this position is now actually declared vacant? And
Yes, we do declare the
Okay.
ANC vacancies, and we are in communication with the Office of ANC. 6 months prior to the general election, we do not fill vacancies. And so that's where we may have a vacancy, but there is no attempt to fill that vacancy. Right now, the filling of vacancies does reside with the Office of ANC. We do provide the voter lists and, of course, the declaration of the vacancy.
all right, and we've had some conversations with a few commissions where we made some suggestions of how they would come about an interim commissioner until such time that the next election would be held, when they would have bona fide candidates. So we're working diligently to get that in place as much as possible. You had indicated at one time that Department of Justice was very anxious to get a copy of our voter files. Where are we with that? Are we still being pressed, as some states are, for that information?
We are. I have actually been sued in my official capacity for not providing the information they've requested. We provided the information that is publicly available. We have been working with our Office of Attorney General with that suit in as far as representation, but we stand by the fact that we have provided the information we are legally required to provide.
Thank you very much for that. And I hope that we can keep it that way. I know that in a discussion with a couple of states, they're distressed and what have you, as to what this really means. I think they're caught up in the same kinds of requests you receive.
Absolutely.
Where, you know,
And
they want everything, yeah.
they do, and I believe I have a fiduciary responsibility to the residents and the voters in the District of Columbia. And we need to be assured that information is being used for proper purposes and being used in a way that safeguards that information. And we have not received assurance of that. And we believe that we are acting according to the law.
All right. In your FY '27 performance plan, you noted there is no target for the FY '26 or '27 for items such as removing deceased voters or duplicate voters from the registry. What does that mean in the long term? Because in fact, are you notified of deceased voters?
We are, and we do conduct list maintenance, so that is occurring. And we have moved voters from an active to an inactive status appropriately.
And are you notified of duplications?
We identify duplicate records in our system, and we do make efforts to merge, to contact voters to ensure we know which one is correct. One of the things that we have found happens, there is somewhat of a lag time if you do online registration, because you do online registration that goes to our data services division. They have to input that data and make sure it's in our database. Sometimes people think that it's pretty instantaneous, so they may register in the morning, they don't see it in the afternoon, and they register again. So that does tend to cause some of the duplicate registrations we have to clean up.
All right, so on duplicate registrations, do you keep records as to how many on a, by FY year? Like, for instance, would you be able to tell us how many were duplicates in FY '25? And likewise, how many were deceased, removed from the rolls in FY '25?
We have deceased record information that I can get to you. I'm not sure that we keep records on the number of duplicates we find. Oh. I will let my general counsel answer that question.
Yep.
Yes, we can provide you with that number. Those are part of our performance measures that we submit annually. So we do talk about and report on list maintenance, generally including like number of voters who are deceased, duplicate registrations removed. There was a time when we had legacy dates of birth in the system, but we no longer have any of those anymore. So we were tracking that for a while. We track voter registrations and updates to voter registrations that occur, whether online or through other means, through the Department of Motor Vehicles. So we do track very specifically list maintenance metrics.
Okay, that's very helpful. I remember years ago, we had a few of our elderly voters up in arms because somehow remember the electronic system had taken them out because I think their birthdays may have been like in 1919 or
Or
something like that.
1800 more likely.
Yeah, there were
Yes.
two that said that
Right.
yes,
And that was because,
1898.
yeah, the applications before a certain point were not tracking their
Right,
birth
right,
information.
right.
So once we've cleaned that up. So now we were reporting to see how long it would take us to get down that number. So now we're at 0. And I
Excellent.
get reports from the Data Services Division quarterly that we put into our performance reports and our planning reports that we submit to the Office of the City Administrator. So we're tracking those
Okay,
things. Yeah.
all right.
So we can give you that information. I would just have
All right, I'm just wondering, am I going to hear from some of them again, what is going on? Okay, thank you so much. So
more
you can be,
200-year-old voters.
right, you could be 110 and we still will have you, okay. Back in those days, we were not thinking you could be 100 and they were, yeah.
And we did, sort of reach out to voters saying, hey, update your information with us. And we got a really great response from the district's electorate. So that was very helpful in that regard.
Very, very nice. I think we went through overtime. This overtime is for your staff, your FTEs.
Correct.
Okay. And why do we have overtime?
We have overtime during an election cycle. It is a standard expense because, when our vote centers open, we are open longer than just an 8-hour workday. Prior to our vote centers opening, there are a lot of activities we're engaged in. We have voter education and outreach events that are happening on the weekends. We have election worker training 6 days a week, and our call center open 6 days a week. We have logic and accuracy testing that is not confined to an 8-hour window. We are, as you know, out in the community on the weekends, out in the community in the evenings. Even leading up to the election, our call center is open later in the evening to fill calls from voters. We are making sure all of our equipment is ready to go out. We're programming our poll pads to ensure they have the proper registration files programmed into that equipment. So there are a number of different things that necessitate longer hours as we get closer to an election. And even once we start getting the mail ballots in, just processing those mail ballots, as you know, people want results as quickly as possible. And so we will often have 2 shifts where we're running the processing unit well into the wee hours of the morning to ensure we can get those mail ballots processed as soon as possible, because there's always a cry for election results. So there are a number of different things in our operations that necessitate overtime, weekend hours, and after-hour work.
Okay, in the election cycle of 2024, what was the overtime budget then? Because you're doing pretty much the same
Yeah,
things,
it
right?
typically runs about the same. I want to say it was about 520,000.
It was 520 in that cycle.
Yes.
What about 22?
I don't have that number right now,
Okay.
but it's typically around the 500.
It's usually about 500,000.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so my big question then is, we know it's going to be 500,000. So why isn't it put in the general budget as opposed to listed as overtime spending. You know you're going to have these hours. You know that you're going to have these individuals.
Absolutely.
I mean, we have an election every 2 years, if not more frequently.
Yes, well, we actually have an election in each fiscal year, the way the
Yes, it
fiscal year
seems
is
to
run.
be. Yes, at
And
least.
so, yeah, because we have a primary or general in each fiscal year, and we always incur overtime. At one point, overtime was in our budget, and then at some point, it was no longer part of our regular budget. But you asked the question, why is it not included? I can't answer that question, but we would like to see it regularly included because it
Okay.
is a regular expense.
All right. So, Mr. Blake, why isn't it included?
It was requested, and it was actually part of the budget submission. And then at some point, there was a policy decision to remove it. And so we made the mayor's office aware of that and of the historical expenditures. And so on a positive note, it has been added to the 27 budget.
Which is, so it's in the, so this is not a separate request then?
Correct.
It's
we now-
within, it's in this 2.1.
It is not in the 2.1 we're
No.
requesting.
It is in the actual budget. So if you look at the budget chapter,
So it's not in the additional request.
Correct.
It's already folded in.
For 27, that is correct.
Okay,
it's been funded for 27.
all right. Yeah, I see it in table DL3. Item 701500C. Last item in the account group. All right, and then I note that in the FY27 budget, you included a 100% decrease for customer experience. So what is customer experience? I don't have the chart that is listed in. L. Smith is going to find it for us. What's
If you
the-
look at table DL0-4, you'll see that that's just the removal or of FTEs.
Okay. Which,
It's this chart.
it's chart DL04, which is your in the proposed 27 operating budget and FTEs by division and activity. Customer experience, AMP 006. Customer experience. In 24, it was 292,000 actual, and 25 actual, 263 approved for this current budget is 294. And then it just drops to 0 for the proposed new budget of 27.
Yes, that's due to a realignment of FTEs.
All right. So these F3 FTEs, they're in another category? Did we lose them or
They're in another category. So if you look
Okay.
at the total FTEs, it's 66, just as in 26 and 27.
All
They're
right,
just in different programs.
yes. So they are now added to, they're added to the voter registration line, which went from 7 to 23 that are now operating in the voter registration program.
That's correct.
Okay. So I have to ask them, what are the other 20 additions that are there? Well, not 20, but 13 additionals. Because it was 7.
Yeah, overall, this was just proper alignment with where people actually perform their work responsibilities.
All right. And so what does voter registration do? I guess I have to ask that then.
So voter registration, they're responsible for candidate access. They're responsible for answering our phones. They're responsible for registering voters. They are the first line to individuals who have access to our office, either by phone or in person.
All right. And so I think you also had mentioned earlier that your telephone responses were extended past the usual 8 hours. So that's some of
Yes.
the work that's there.
Yes, that will happen once early voting starts.
All right.
Absolutely.
And then you have voter services where from 3 FTEs expanded to 7. So 4 new folk there.
Yes, so we have a lot of different programs. We have voter services, and voter services, what I just described. We
Okay.
have data services, and they're responsible for updating our database with voter registration updates and processing new voter registrations and looking at duplicate registrations. So they are working directly with our voter registration database.
All right. So voter services works with the database.
Data services works with the
Yeah,
database.
I'm sorry, I'm
Voters-
from the old school.
Yes, databases.
Databases.
Yes,
Data.
data services works with the
We did
database
back in the
and
day.
actually inputting the information and registration changes.
Okay.
Voter services is the first line of contact with individuals, either by phone or when they come into the office. And then they handle candidate pickup, petitions, and that whole process.
So they have not just customer service, but they also have some other technical
Absolutely.
needs.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. When we start looking at budgets, I just want,
And there's a
I
lot
want to be
there.
on top of
Understood, yes.
the mother planet, as I say. Want to make sure that I know what we have. We have to have, yeah. Well, we thank you very much for your time and attention today. And sorry you had to wait so long, but blame it on the Office of Campaign Finance and especially on Destination DC that's trying very hard to get people here to spend money so that you'll have money to keep these
Absolutely.
elections going.
And we appreciate that, Councilmember Bonds. And of course, before we end, I would be remiss if I didn't thank you for your service to DC and specifically your service to DC Board of Elections. You've been incredibly supportive of our work. You have made every effort to get us the space, the funding we need, and you have amplified the message of our office through your own events. And I just want to thank you for that. We appreciate you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I am looking forward to having a crowd at the convention center with the Board of Elections on Saturday, the 23rd, starting at 9:30. If you're get there after 10, we probably will not have buns and coffee left, but we will have lunch for you starting around noon. But don't come at noon or you will miss the opportunity to ask every question in the universe about ranked choice voting and what it really means. And maybe you can devise your own secret methodology for how to mark your ballot after you hear their presentation. So I thank you all so very, very much. And it's always been a pleasure to hear from you. I know we have a tough job. You know, working in DC, elections is not easy, but it is fun. So I'll leave it on that note. And thank you very much for entertaining us today.
Thank you, council member.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes the committee's budget oversight hearing today. In fact, this is our last hearing in this budget cycle. Hooray! And I want to thank the directors of the government agencies, and I want to thank our public witnesses. We've had days with just public witnesses, and you may recall there was a lot of carrying on about something that was not about the current budget, so I didn't entertain it with you today. But I appreciate all of the feedback we've received from the public as well as from our agencies. And I just want to thank everyone. And so our markup on the FY27 budget is planned for Thursday, May 21, 2026. With that, the time is 1:31 p.m. on the same day in which we started, May 8th, 2026. And this concludes our hearing for today. Thank you. And thanks to my staff. They've been Hercules.